Okay. I think we're all set. Whoop. Is that a lot on my side, or is it just me? Maybe it's just me. Anyway, I think we can switch over to the other one. I really think we're set for this. You know, guy the other day was probably just some weird troll or hacker or some shit, but I do think it is about time that I start working on getting some, like, you know, BRB screens and things like that. Start commissioning that. I mean, I may as well have been doing this long enough, right? All right, so let's have this on read aloud, and we'll get going, I think. Is it gonna read? Let's see. Let me make sure.
They will bear fruit later. A majority of the Chalice dungeons we explore belong to the country of Thumru, to the point that the underground ruins population of Thumurians enemies are each labeled as Dungeon Man internally. The name Thumru, or Tumur, is an obvious combination of the English tomb with Sumer, the oldest known example.
Oh god, the pronunciations of this I can already see are gonna be they're gonna be something. Let's put this a little slow. I'll put it a little higher, but I think this should be. Let's do there.
They will bear fruit later. A majority of the Chalice dungeons we explore belong to the country of Thumru, to the point that the underground ruins population of Thumurians enemies are each labeled as Dungeon Man internally. The name Thumru, or Tumur, is an obvious combination of the English tomb with Sumer, the oldest known example of human civilization. This is fitting, since the preceding country of this can be considered the gods' civilization. Whether or not other civilizations preceded them both, Thumru is the oldest country of men featured throughout the entire game. This begs the question of its origin. The nation's royal capital, Thumru Hill, is located at depth 5 like this, suggesting that the state was established at least before it became buried in many more layers of dirt. The Thumurian culture also generally consists of grave keepers, the most common enemies patrolling the tombs as protectors or keepers. How does a civilization dedicated to watching over the slumbering great ones emerge in seemingly their immediate wake? In truth, the circumstances behind Thumru are easy to imagine. The ones disproportionately reaping the benefits of its research would have been the researchers themselves as well as their sponsors, the societal elite able to devote the time and resources to apotheosis. But it needed a working class to function, the lower rungs of society that kept civilization going while their betters indulged in frivolous pursuits of hyper-evolution on the backs of their labor. They were the ones least likely to join the stars by the end of this insanity. Indeed, someone had to take care of the gods' human bodies as they enjoyed eternal rest. Alongside them would be the victims of Is experiments or the monstrosities created in said experiments. When there were no more great ones departing for the heavens, there were still the servants left to pick up after them, converting their capital into a necropolis. These gravekeepers were the last remnants of a country which had otherwise collapsed. The Watchers had a model to follow. Exploring the dungeons, we inevitably come across the watchdog and keeper of the old lords. Despite the similarity to the Watcher's name as gravekeepers, the latter is more accurately a watchman, to complement the watchdog and reaffirm their close association. Official websites clarify this watchdog of the old lords to be the oldest in the ruins, with descriptions to the watchman's equipment similarly noting them to be the oldest. It is obvious that their analogous names serve to designate them both as the predecessors to the Thumurian gravekeepers. A relation to the old lords thus implies service to the great ones back when they were still citizens of Is, and the official websites do claim that the inhuman ones resting in the ruins personally left these watchmen with their duties. They were the first to begin protecting the stars' graves, back when Is was still a functional nation with people concerned about their legacy on Earth. These gravekeeping duties are eternal, for the watchmen themselves are special on account of the power of flame they possess. The watchdog's connection is more immediately obvious. From the blazing flames covering the entire body inside and out, the gargantuan canine has become a corpse-like withered fossil, with no blood to bleed when hit. Doubtless, a pet was experimented upon to become such a fiery monstrosity. As for the keeper of the old lords, this watchman was baptized in hellfire, body and soul reduced to charcoal. They still have blood to bleed and vials to inject, curiously enough, but their actual bodies are little more than bone turned to ash, and then fashioned into armor, the skeletal mask a reminder that these are golems of death, not unlike undead giants. That white and sinewy armor blackened from scorching is too frail for man, but concept art depicts the watchmen with fire burning from within like the watchdog, and they exhibit a certain mastery of conjuring flame from their hands in battle. They're the products of lost arts, with the arcane which no modern man has replicated. Fire serves as a means of purification, so burning them was probably intended to stop them from becoming beasts. Reinforcing this point, keepers of the old lords are often accompanied by their hounds. The keepers' hunting dogs look more like your typical canine, except they possess demonic horns like the beast possessed soul and long tongues like blood lickers. These obviously started becoming beasts. But the transformation seems to have halted, with the loyal dogs capable of breathing fire. They are just another experiment which is provided to help their watchmen. Together, the different kinds of immortal guardians secure the great one's graves at every waking moment. Their creators...
I was worried this section, because I moved it from the end to the beginning for this latest draft, I was worried this was not going to come out well, but so far it's flowing together pretty well. Like, it makes sense to talk about this. It's connecting back to the gravekeepers often enough, so I think this is working.
Never fearing their blood's eventual degeneration into beasthood. Even now, we can encounter both varieties as bosses or roaming enemies in practically every dungeon, mindlessly extending their duty to every tomb in the labyrinth. They are constant guiding lights for others to aspire to, and it is clear that the Proto-Thumurians were following the old watchman's lead in becoming gravekeepers. While that deep connection explains why both cultures drink from great chalices, it doesn't satisfy the question of their enthusiasm. For what reason did the Proto-Thumurians remain so dedicated to burying bodies in the ruins of an old home yet populated by monsters? The answer lies in how they enshrined the bodies in eternal rest as gods. The burials were a form of worship. It was fear and awe which kept them loyally serving, a religious devotion to former men. Perhaps those ideas were imposed on them by the elite, or perhaps the Proto-Thumurians reached their own conclusions about their divinity. Whichever was the case, it was still this lasting belief in the stars above being gods on earth, which kept the Thumurians willing to appease them for generation after generation. The new clan of gravekeepers continued interring bodies whilst fending off the enormous rats and monstrosities seeking to defile them, especially when those bodies belonged to their gods. Eventually, however, the Watchers tired of their role. Their masters may have become gods among men, but those men still wanted to live for themselves. The description to the Great Thumru Ihil Chalice admits as much, the royal capital serving as proof of at least an attempt to have a king for their tribe. This king is customarily a woman, so any actual king would be consort to the reigning queen of a matriarchy. Nonetheless, she was the ruler of all Thumerians, based in a new city established alongside the gravestone. No longer would they be mere stewards of a dead civilization, but architects of a living one along with the dynasty. Naturally, this capital for the queen shared the name of her title in their language, Thumru Ihil. This was essentially their statement to the gods above, the only one who would understand their language, assuming that it is a carryover from the Ist tongue. If Thumru was to be the name for themselves and Ihil the word for their ruler, then they had declared their final separation from the old homeland as part of crafting a sovereign identity. Of course, this was hardly a rebellion against the Great Ones. Their reverence for the gods is showcased in their continued service as gravekeepers. Even the royal city is a tomb, no different from this. The Thumerians incorporate many affectations of urban infrastructure throughout the labyrinth, including artistic decorations. However, the metropolis is nonetheless built out as another necropolis, with gravestones and coffins of all sorts filling practically every chamber. The Watchers weren't forsaking their duties to their ancestors, just carving out a time and place for them to pursue their own interests. As eons passed and the dirt piled up, the Thumerians continued building upon their capital, with new tombs ascending up the tower layer after layer, until we reached the Thumru ruins at depth 1 in the modern day. Is and Thumru Ihil both became a secret, buried so deep under all that earth and stone, to even the most daring dungeon diver. And yet, the Thumerians continue to honor their transcendent forerunners. As a result of their long history underground, the Thumerians have changed from normal humans. Official websites point out how pale their cold, damp skin has become, untouched by the sun, while their eyes have degenerated into large and sunken black irises to better suit the low-light conditions. When not bald, they almost invariably possess silvery gray hair, seemingly irrespective of physical aging. The Thumerian enemies we encounter similarly come in all sorts of shapes and sizes, some far larger than the average man. It is possible that most larger examples are artistic license, but the inclusion of giants does affirm that they can grow to such hulking proportions. Nonetheless, the doorways and more are made for our size, so we can infer that the vast majority are tall and lanky, but ultimately still human in stature. The gradual transformation makes them appear inhuman despite very much remaining human at their core. Granted, that inhumanity, as with the great ones they worship, has its perks. Although the Thumerian descendant and elder look identical, the latter wields a cane and performs less physically demanding feats. If they are both old men as they appear, then the different names must simply highlight how old, the elder perhaps being one of the original generations during the transition to a proper polity. And if there is that big an age disparity between the descendant and elder, then the only conclusion to draw is that the Thumerians are long-lived, their lifespans far surpassing that of the average of man on the surface, which by all implications is no different than on planet Earth. One might curse an extended twilight years, but it is possible that longer lifespans are limited to only certain Thumerians. After exploring the dungeons, there is no denying the complexities of Thumru, a society built over eons to have a rich history and culture. Songs are the city's diviners. Although the labyrinth is regarded as an underground ruin, it is clear that a living, breathing society still exists and is constantly expanding. At every level, we can find gravediggers working to add onto existing tombs with each swing of...
I do like acknowledging that early, but it does make me feel like just saying it out there without getting the explanation until sections later. I don't know how I feel about that, so that might need to be marked for... I'm gonna mark this just in case. All right.
Although the labyrinth is regarded as an underground ruin, it is clear that a living, breathing society still exists and is constantly expanding. At every level, we can find gravediggers working to add onto existing tombs with each swing of their pickaxe when not guarding the premises on the standard keeper's behalf. There are always renovations to be made to the cities that the Thumerians have established in their towering labyrinth. The Hintertomb is the most ambitious example. Existing only at depths 2 and 3, this section of the complex is relatively recent in Thumerian history, though not existing as part of the core labyrinth. Rather, the name Remote Graves denotes the Hintertomb as the frontier, with the kanji presenting additional connotations of a rustic quality. If the various Thumru dungeons are the urban center, the Hintertomb dungeons are the rural outskirts. Descriptions to their chalices note how the Watchers continue to expand this section, building out horizontally as they wait for the earth to build up vertically. Civilization is only accelerating. Beyond the infrastructure, there is also economy. The shining coins collected in tombs confirm the existence of hard currency based on rare metals, with treasure vaults filled with gold wares. Considering how they spend so much of their time digging through the earth, it shouldn't come as a surprise that the Thumerians have gathered plenty of valuable metals and gems. Naturally, much of this wealth is collected in the royal capital, with Thumru Ihil providing the most coins of any story dungeon. Conversely, the fact that we cannot collect these coins in the Hintertomb outside select enemies betrays the relative poverty in rural areas compared to that urban center. The coins reflect the concentration of power, with the queen controlling the flow of capital to invest into her city, but also the labyrinth at large. We likely see this in projects like the various massive gardens preserving a semblance of the greenery on the surface, growing plants as exotic as fluorescent flowers. The gravekeepers needed their luxuries, and public parks was just one way to satiate the crowd while showing off the crown's coffers. Of course, the queen cannot do all this alone. Alongside her in affluence appear to have been a noble class. The Thumerian descendants and elders, combined, can be encountered in almost every root dungeon. Both bosses share a model of a gray-haired man in ornate and assuredly expensive dress, conveying status and luxury carrying him into old age. Internally, these dungeon men are labeled as lord, so there is no doubt that they are the equivalent to feudal lords in medieval societies. The queen bestows certain individuals and their families with nobility and assigns them a holding across her ever-growing dominion. In governing the land, they are the ones to lay claim to any mineral wealth found in their territory, amassing fortunes which only partially must be paid to the royal coffers and improving their territory. The most successful and prosperous aristocrats worm their way into the capital, where they wine and dine whilst building a power base to affect politics and further enrich themselves. The Thumerians seem to follow this all-too-common pattern for the elite. Nonetheless, the nobility serve at the behest of the queen and do exist in almost every section of the labyrinth, time seeming to be the deciding factor. We see that the most recent layer of Thumru has not been assigned any lords. Thumerian elders and descendants likewise only appear in the lower Hintertomb, the more recent Hintertomb left to the rabble. Perhaps there are simply fewer lords needed to govern the Bunis, but the Thumru dungeon, at least, insinuates that a labyrinth needs to first develop its infrastructure and economy over a lengthy period before any new regional governors are assigned to help manage it as an independent province. Whatever the specifics behind this election, the aristocracy filled the temporal role in leading the people, leaving the spiritual role to fall to someone else. Thumru naturally has its cleric class. Ritualists appear diminutive in size, but the robes are deceptive. If not for their bizarre hunched-over stance, they would stand taller than most, as shown when they do
What happened?
Aim to stretch those legs. True to their name, these men have...
Huh? What the hell happened? We lost it somehow? Yeah, I don't know what happened there.
Go the way in learning sacred rites, the nature of which are fittingly macabre. Each ritualist holds a severed hand as a candle.
Oh god, it's awful.
Holder in an open skull is a mixing vessel from which the cleric conjures fire magic or arcane energy.
Oh god, it's awful. What happened to our nice voice? Why do we have the shitty one now? Yeah, I don't know. No idea what happened there. Let me see if exiting and coming back in will fix it. Let's see. That kind of sucks. Let's see.
That the underground ruins population of Thumerians and...
Yeah, now it's... I don't know what happened there. There must have been something on the internet or not? I don't know why the internet would matter for here. Where were we? We were on the ritualists. Where was it? See? Yeah, okay, here we go. Let's start from the beginning of the paragraph.
Thumru naturally has its cleric class. Ritualists appear diminutive in
That was
size,
weird.
but the robes are
Whatever.
deceptive. If not for their bizarre hunched-over stance, they would stand taller than most, as shown when they do deign to stretch those legs. True to their name, these men have toiled away at learning sacred rites, the nature of which are fittingly macabre. Each ritualist holds a severed hand as a candle holder and an open skull as a mixing vessel, from which the cleric conjures fire magic or arcane energy. These make them dangerous range attackers, but their rituals primarily serve to build up society's knowledge and facilitate communion with the gods. They're the brains of the elite, keeping low to the ground to better examine corpses for their research. Ritualists are the ones typically crafting the shaman bone blade, taking the bones and cerebrospinal fluid of a brainsucker to create a mind-controlling tool for their ceremonies, no doubt to further study beasts and kin up close and personal. Their esoteric ways contribute greatly to the culture, so they ignore the various body parts they take. However, the description to Hintertomb chalices make clearly that the remote graves are sparsely ritualized. The clerical class gives little attention to these newer sections far from the concentration of people. Instead, the rural types have developed their own religious practices. The short ritual root chalice acquired after defeating a Thumerian elder in the lower Hintertomb demonstrates the informal nature of such ceremonies even among local nobility. When the mainline orthodoxy isn't asserting cultural pressure, it was inevitable for residents to gradually drift from the mainstream, with peculiar customs. Besides the glass cup for simplified rituals, there are also eye collectors. These hunchback women in ragged robes go around carving out bloodshot eyeballs from, preferably, those still living. Their obsession is so strong, they even collect pebbles should they resemble eyes. While brutal, we see the results with a variant covered in eyeballs, capable of conjuring arcane arts. Their work is practical. With story dungeons featuring eye collectors in the Hintertombs and ritualists in Thumru tombs to the exclusion of the other, we can infer that the former fill in the gap left by the clergy. These female clerics embody a belief in the power of eyes, likely because they connect them to insight. Indeed, besides the Hintertombs, eye collectors only appear in its root dungeons, barring additional rites. Is also placed emphasis on the eyes for insight, the quality of which apparently attracts some Thumerian women to come and collect. They must believe that amassing such eyeballs will lead to enlightenment, though it is presumably more their bloodshot nature which makes them so valuable for deriving powers of the arcane. However, the same folk belief developed in the Hintertombs secluded far above. It is the heterodox practice of the clergy women there. A plurality of rural citizens placing their faith in them over the male priests likely because they are women and thus fill the role of the queen in this matriarchal culture. Admittedly, female clerics are commonplace throughout the labyrinth. A Thumerian madwoman constantly rings a bell to summon enemies around her. The way the endless horde rises from portals in the ground with a red glow flowing across their body suggests that they are souls reconstructed from blood. When the summoner is killed, so are the summons, reinforcing how their life force is tied to hers, most likely, because they are quickly conjured up by simple ritual. We can assume her madness to be the product of a deep immersion in arcane forces. Bells also features in dungeons, larger ones hanging from the ceiling individually or in an arranged cluster. The Thumerians understood sound's ability to cross planes, this bell ringer showcasing that full potential when combined with the power in her own blood. And with how she strolls around in her fancy dress, absent-mindedly summoning, indicates noble or clerical status, potentially both. Adorning major doorways are figures of a kindly woman watching over a grave with similar hood. The bell ringer might be the equivalent of an itinerant monk, traveling around to deepen her and others' spirituality through action. The reality was that the supernatural was very natural in a place like Thumru. Descriptions of the country's chalices detail its people's wisdom concerning arcane forces, which is expressed in something as mundane as the blue flames lighting much of the tombs. The Thumerians didn't require much in ways of proselytization. The divine mysteries weren't much mysteries to them. What they needed was confirmation of that power's connection to the gods in the natural world. All these arcane rites, beyond their practical value for gravekeeping, were needed to reinforce that the keeper's duties were serving a grander purpose, the stars valuing their thankless work and rewarding those efforts with their secrets. Contact with the Great Ones wasn't something just anyone could accomplish, as we can see from the occasional scene of basic watchers reaching for the heavens or shaking their heads in the dirt due to madness. Without liaisons to convey their deity's intent, how can they know the benefits of worship? But if they can't trust the clergy, it is up to them to confirm that their idols exist. Pilgrims with a walking stick or prayer beads as they make their long journey. We only encounter one inside a single-story dungeon, his place in the uppermost Thumru labyrinth pegging him as a local just starting on his pilgrimage. Root dungeons confirm that this this takes them down deep to holy sites such as this, the birthplace of their gods. Faithful from all overhead to the bottom of the towering labyrinth to confirm the history of their grand civilization, willing to weather the risks of setting out in this world full of monsters. Although largely harmless, these pilgrims can defend themselves. Upon noticing a threat, their bodies begin to glow a ghostly white, casting a small arcane explosion to keep the attacker away before returning to their pilgrimage. Their faith has been rewarded with at least basic understanding of their god's power, simple as the arts might be. But they're nonetheless feeble citizens, ill-equipped for a plunge to the deepest depths where we find the real horrors. Overall, veneration of the Great Ones went hand in hand with gravekeeping, so developing their spirituality and understanding of the arcane was just as important to the Thumerians as building a secular government. Defending the tombs was chiefly to honor them, after all. They were the ancestors who achieved miraculous power and longevity, where even death was merely resting rather than resting in peace. Their bodies were essentially sacrosanct. The clerical class and customs were a natural outgrowth of the Watchers' core beliefs about the so-called gods. Whether this became the state-sponsored religion or relies on private alms, the clergy must hold a similar level of influence to the aristocracy in society. The ritual blood, however, alludes to a third pillar undergirding Thumuru's foundation: blood drinking. My drink is a river.
All right.
Part and parcel to a Thumerian ritual was blood. We see that ritualists freely handle the quality blood used in those rites, and all their congregants probably participate. Indeed, every Thumuru dungeon has its own chalice. The cups for blood become larger and fancier in size as was descend down. The capital's idea of great grails may have been borrowed from this, which did the same with its chalices. But the drinking of blood itself was widespread.
Okay, I was like, that does not sound like it was just as was descend down. Okay, that did not sound like it was just a weird glitch on the pronunciation there. Let's start from here.
We descend down. The capital's idea of great grails may have been borrowed from this, which did the same with its chalices. But the drinking of blood itself was widespread, from lowliest commoner to loftiest aristocrat. According to official websites, the gravekeepers subsist on blood and carrion, implicitly taken from the graves they guard, if not the robbers they stop. We do see a deformed head center among the offerings in their treasure rooms, a single sacrifice more valuable than all the gold and weaponry. And when using the heads and hands of saints in additional rites, the resulting dungeon empowers enemies or even replaces them with foes like successful collectors or ritualists. The fetid smell of death for a saint's blood clearly excites the Thumerians, drawing in clergy especially to get their hands on it. The stimulation also implies that the race will do anything for blood, even visit sections of the labyrinth they otherwise avoid. Concept art does depict merciless watchers covered in bloodstains, especially on the hands. These Thumerians in particular have fattened up on the ritual blood they possess. Without a doubt, beyond any stipend they might receive for their service, more and better blood is the measure for a gravekeeper's diligence in his work. Rewarding this is what motivates the whole to be unrelentingly cruel killers, not letting a single threat get away. We can see how merciless watchers will group up in small parties, headed by a chieftain, who is more accurate to call a squad leader or captain in this context. The three-man squads roam the labyrinth, searching for threats to put down so that they may gorge upon more blood. The only place they apparently won't go is Lauren dungeons. Otherwise, they're on the hunt for blood, in every sense of the phrase. Not every Thumerian might have the skills to gorge on such a prize, but it is the universal incentive. Of course, elites should take the higher priority when it comes to blood of the maximum quality. Besides the clerics, the nobility must also amass a wealth of blood, with the royalty enjoying the luxury greater still. In Thumuru Ihil, we collect the strongest Carol runes related to obtaining more blood. There is communion, which increases the maximum blood vials we can carry, and also air, which increases the number of blood echoes from visceral attacks. Most probably source their wine from the graves they keep, but tearing out fresh blood and viscera by hand was evidently a pastime for high society, and the quality of the blood mattered just as much. Formless Eden and Eden Writhe exact the most amount of quicksilver from blood for us to carry or obtain from visceral attacks. It wasn't just about imbibing blood, but getting to the enlightened essence within the blood, as seen with certain merciless watchers who provide quicksilver for bullets whilst possessing no firearms. In fact, that idea of blood purity seems to hold far too much currency in capital society. When creating Thumuru Ihil dungeons, there is a 20% chance that the dungeon will receive a poison modifier, causing random enemies and liquid pools to inflict the slow-acting poison status. While it is not a guaranteed chance like in Hintertombs, the obvious implication is that poisons have infested a significant portion of the royal capital. These poisons include disease, as demonstrated by the white pill functioning as an antidote for poison when the description details its use.
I think we should say there's a fixed chance. Because I already mentioned it's not guaranteed. Yeah, I think that's fine. Not gonna lie, snuggling up with a cat who loves and trusts you with one of those pet sleep aid videos in the background. Gotta be a top 5 experience of all time. Glad to hear that, Nick. I would not know the experience. All right, now let's get back to this.
Fixed chance that the dungeon will receive a poison modifier, causing random enemies and liquid pools to inflict the slow-acting poison status. While it is not a guaranteed chance like in Hintertombs, the obvious implication is that poisons have infested a significant portion of the royal capital. These poisons include disease, as demonstrated by the white pill functioning as an antidote for poison when the description details its use treating disease. It is all too fitting that Thumuru Ill be a city plagued by illness. The gravekeepers have even made use of the pathogens, burning the poisonous material with their incense to instead create noxious gas. But the question remains, why does the capital struggle with random diseases more than the average city in the urban core above? The problem clearly isn't a lack of resources compared to the poorer areas. That just leaves the constitution of the residents themselves. If the city consists of a disproportionate number of the upper class, then they must be the draws for disease. The insinuation isn't surprising. Rigid caste systems invariably put inordinate emphasis on lineage, the privileged bloodlines refusing to marry down and intermix with the unwashed masses whenever possible. The result is purer blood for nobles who only share relations with fellow nobles. Blood quality may well be the key factor when deciding who will receive a noble title and become the latest provincial lord. For a culture obsessed with the taste of good blood, surely they would believe that those with good blood are superior, specimens most worthy of the responsibilities coming with privilege. Nobility in itself implies a certain virtue embodied by the aristocratic class, virtue which the Thumerians would identify with the silver in blood. That only reinforces society's belief in keeping the high-class blood pure by marrying into similar families. And in the city where power and money is concentrated, the many nobles doubtless prefer to marry each other for political alliances and hefty dowries. Put simply, Thumru Ihil likely suffers from a severe case of inbreeding, the relatively small gene pool causing higher instances of
I still
sickliness
love
from the
how I
rest of
word
the
that.
population. This is likely made worse by their decadent lifestyle, the luxury isolating their immune systems from the same tests the rugged rabble experience every day surviving in the dirt and hardship. The result is an explosion of epidemics, which then become endemic to the city itself and thereby all its residents. While it is impossible to confirm germ theory from just our observation of the setting, the source of disease undoubtedly has proliferated in this section of the labyrinth. And the reason is because the upper class made themselves prime vectors for breeding illness. On that basis, we can say that the capital's obsession with blood has come to their detriment, but still the people persist with the blood drunkenness. Whether or not they realize the connection between pure bloods and pathogens, blood is already core to the culture. No Thumerian will give up drinking the stuff, and all understand that it begets ailments. This fact is widely expressed in Thumru's art. For every relief of bearded men with books, clearly representative of wise men studying and teaching about the arcane, there are countless more statues of figures covered up from head to toe, shrouding their face, hiding the symptoms and blemishes of disease ailing them. While it may not be as severe as in the capital, all of Thumru recognizes a prevalence of sickness amongst them, sickness tied to blood in particular. Cut content suggests that the main grave for the Chalice dungeons was originally planned to be called not Thumru, but Gremia, combining the English grave with the medical suffix emia, denoting a condition related to blood. And when it comes to blood conditions related to graves there, none stands on the same pedestal as the beast scourge. More than anything, blood addicts in Thumru are doomed to a plague of beasthood. It didn't matter how high the quality of blood they imbibed. If anything, robbing from the old graves just made matters worse. No matter where in their civilization you look, it is the universal problem, impossible to ignore. Yet that is a reality they accept as part of life in the underground. In fact, the solution to any vestemia appears to have been more blood. Blood vials are plentiful loot from the dead, with practically every watcher keeping the health tonic on hand. Perhaps this practice was a carryover from this. Regardless, it was easy for Thumru Ihil to view man's life force as the invigorating treatment to their various illnesses, which then trickled down to the rest of the Thumerian society built up over the ages. Now, treating injury or ailment with a quick transfusion is standard practice, further feeding their addiction. That meant more beasts, but that is arguably public policy. The clockwise metamorphosis rune obtainable in Thumru Ihil says it all. The Thumerian hierarchy welcomes the dream of evolution which blood brings. Perhaps it is because it can extend their debilitated lives, given how the rune boosts HP. Still, they aren't troubled by the beasts created in pursuit of evolving their race. Once again, they are likely taking notes from this. Didn't their old masters experience those same growing pains, working through waves of beasts before finally arriving at the arcane truth? They didn't shirk the blood or beasts to reach the heights of higher beings. Ebriatus derives her name from Latin to mean inebriation, in obvious connection to this. If they wanted to be like some of their gods they could still witness on Earth, then drink blood to intoxication. Just as the metamorphosis runes appear like a vortex which can suck you right in, Thumru fell into the abyss of beasthood, hoping to come out the other end of that whirlpool as stars in the sky. And some doubtless have shared in its success, becoming new gods to venerate in death. Most were not so fortunate, however. The beast-possessed soul is a possible boss in all Buddhist and standard Hintertomb dungeons, but it also appears as a random encounter in any part of the labyrinth, like the Watchers. The horned lupin is thus an example of the kind of beasts that the Thumerians become, which we see represented in the ruins' decorative grotesques. Another example is the bloodlicker. This enemy isn't uniquely vulnerable to the same weapons as most beasts, but that is presumably due to its unconventional physiology. The pale white creature looks human, save the disjointed limbs and spine, crawling around with its whip-like tongue ready to lap up any blood. The way it fattens its belly, grows small hairs, and jumps around like a flea, it is undoubtedly a human transformed into a bloodthirsty monster. And this creature has a chance to appear in most dungeons, after killing a foe with a visceral attack. While we continue to explore, the licker follows the scent of blood to scavenge the splatter. Much like the beast-possessed soul, the enemy seems to be one of the forms Thumerians take after indulging their addiction for too long. The difference lies in the nature of what they imbibe. Despite their ubiquity, bloodlickers appear to be more prevalent in the capital. In rare instances, a small group roams sinister versions of Thumru Ihil. This coincides with the unique recurrence of another beast-like enemy in that city. The lost child of antiquity possesses the body of a bat, but the head of an elderly man. It also owns a similar weakness ratio to fire versus arcane or bolt damage as the standard beast and can perform similar stunning roars and blood-sucking bites. While it doesn't share the same weapon weakness as well, this can be attributed to its non-standard physiology, same as the bloodlicker. It is safe to classify both as a unique kind of beast. Lost child is just a more literal rendering of Otashigo, which historically referred to a noble's bastard, but commonly denotes any kind of negative consequence, such as a monster emergent from blood drinking. This makes Spawn of Old a more accurate label, and it, too, proliferates at the heart of the Thumerian civilization.
Otashigo.
Why? Because of all the nobles, of course. Indeed, only the number of nobles,
Otashigo.
circulating the best blood amongst solely themselves, majorly differentiate Thumru Ihil from the rest of the labyrinth.
God,
The
it's
heightened bizarre manifestations of the beast disease must thus be another byproduct of their blood's purity, though impurity might be more accurate. Both the bloodlicker and Spawn of Old enemies suffer especially from the righteous damage of silver weapons. What makes them so unrighteous? For at least the licker, presumably the copious blood it continues to absorb, particularly from those who have been brutally killed and are likely to hold a serious grudge. We can see this in the lost will weapon acquired in Thumru Ihil, covered in blood, which causes the trick weapon to retain powerful grudges. It is very telling about the ill intent of local hunters' prey. No ordinary will in blood breeding such strong resentment with other beasts. Perhaps the human shape of the grudges implies that the will hunted those yet human. Nevertheless, a great amount of evil is clearly cultivated in the blood of the capital's residents. Malice is, of course, present in every will to some extent. But the amount of high-quality blood served in Thumru Ihil builds up that much more within its imbibers, compounded by the inbreeding. As a result, nobles of the capital carry with them a larger percentage of ill will than the average citizen, leading to more instances of blood lickers, and even the creation of bat spawn when they do succumb to beasthood. The lickers and evil spirits roaming other sections of the ruins confirm that this level of maliciousness is possible elsewhere, but it is straightforwardly systemic to the capital's decadence. This leads to more trouble long-term. The Spawn of Old seems to survive for so long thanks to their flight capability and heightened intelligence. The enemy is always clinging high up on ceilings or blending in with the statues to lie in ambush or evade extermination. But no part of Thumru was immune to the degenerative consequences to blood drinking. And those who did not become new stars to bury became beasts to hunt. Fate is a dog. Thumru's beast hunts seem to be about as old as its religion and blood drinking. Two of the weapons acquired in Thumru Ihil are Blade of Mercy and Burial Blade, both which were crafted with meteoric iron. With the size of the iron too large for the standard bullets of arcane art, this implies that actual meteors fell in their area before that original layer of civilization became buried with time. This may be coincidence, but considering how meteors are typically the Great One's angered response to attempts at contact, it is more likely the result of praying to their gods in hard times, with a life spent guarding graves as their fellow man turns into beasts. The blood addicts were sure to have plenty to beseech their transcendent ancestors. Evidently, the Proto-Thumerians took the deity's answer as a sign to hunt the beasts plaguing them with the special iron with which they forged an arsenal. Now that the people have become subterranean, they no longer receive such blessings, but the determination to hunt remains. One rune in particular came to be associated with the hunter at Thumru. Whether or not that was the meaning the Great Ones communicated, the hanging rune resembling an upside-down man was adopted as a core symbol, iconography plastered on walls and grave sites all across the labyrinth. It is easy to see why the shape struck a chord. In tarot, the hangman represents self-sacrifice for a greater good, suspension awaiting new insight, a new perspective focused on the spiritual, and wisdom obtained through trials of hardship. All things consistent with the Mirian religion so far as their blood drinking and beast epidemic are concerned. If the beast was just a growing pain, then they saw their tribe at a critical juncture in the transition between man and God. The rune embodies that purgatory as they strive for heaven, and its increase to stamina regeneration encourages action. The gravekeepers couldn't be passive on the road to enlightenment. They needed to take hold of their own fates. And the hunter is a manifestation of that ethos, their avatar of change pointed against regression. This usage of the hunter rune likely goes back to us, the rotted corpse enemy carrying bold hunter's marks even in the Astoria dungeon. Hunters would be the most terrified to see themselves regress, choosing death over becoming a beast, albeit too late in the enemy's case. Even the citizens of surely saw the occasional beast as an inflection point for their own enlightenment. This was just another legacy which Thumru is carrying on in some form. Maybe they simply inherited the cultural mark following its collapse, or maybe they had rediscovered the rune in the course of praying for salvation. The end result was the same, widespread adoption for the purposes of the hunt. We see countless human corpses hung upside down in emulation of the rune, surely victims of hunters who saw early signs of the beast scourge in them. The message couldn't be more clear. You beasts are holding us back from greatness, beware. With that faith in one day reaching the stars, the gravekeepers do not tolerate small-minded fools, disturbing the gods' rest. The means to effectuate a beast hunt was varied. Besides trick weapons, watchers commonly wield hooks, cleavers, daggers, halberds, and axes. Hunters of the underground ruins have likewise adopted a number of tools. A handful utilize arcane lanterns to help keep watch, alerting all the nearby gravekeepers of intruders with a wild ring of the flame like a bell. Simple keepers may also throw poison bombs, though we actually loot the knife equivalent from their bodies. Since this method is slow, others prefer firebombs and fire in general. Indeed, the countless instances of weapons clad in flame thanks to fire paper is likely why the beast-possessed soul can shoot flame from its hands. The pyromaniacs loved wielding the stuff so much on the hunt. The power became internalized when they transformed into a beast. While that makes the beast a bigger threat, the risk was obviously worth it. Just as well, the gravekeepers had plenty of indirect ways to deal with both man and beast. For one, they set up traps all throughout the labyrinth. Swinging sides, giant guillotines, rolling stone balls, burning wood balls, fire arrows, there was a huge variety of hazards to navigate. If someone made a misstep on an easy-to-miss button, it might not be a deadly mechanism, but an arcane ritual being triggered, blood enemies instantly summoned to ambush. There were even ritual setups, messengers driving us into the circle of candles we step into before teleporting us to a potentially more dangerous part of the dungeon. The latter, like illusory walls, were limited to the deepest dungeons hoarding the arcane wisdom, but it shows how the Mirians aren't lacking for creativity.
Okay, no, it just sounded weird, I guess.
When all else fails, they could always lock down that section of the labyrinth, mechanisms operated by a...
Yeah, Tumaru has a really good... I like the vampire direction they go with Bloodborne for the characters. I think it's a really nice twist.
The latter, like illusory walls, were limited to the deepest dungeons hoarding the arcane wisdom, but it shows how the Mirians aren't lacking for creativity. When all else fails, they could always lock down that section of the labyrinth, mechanisms operated by a large lever hidden elsewhere, sealing the major doors for progression through the dungeon. If they couldn't stem the outbreak, they could at least contain it with a quarantine. Another ubiquitous tool is incense. The Eden Chapel dweller mentions using incense as beast repellent, and we do see curious urns of light in the chapel. Elsewhere, these urns are surrounded by piles of human bone and ash, so we can be certain that they burn people's remains to produce those fumes, at least in part. This makes sense for warding off beasts, since the smell of burning blood and blood marrow are sure to offend their senses. It will hardly sate their bloodthirst. This probably makes it difficult for a beast to focus while traveling through an area thick with the incense, though areas with it don't actually hinder beasts in terms of gameplay mechanics. And we see these same urns for burning beast repellent within the underground ruins, incense burners lit in various ruin halls and chambers. The fumes come from burning remains, which the Mirians have in abundance, so they have plenty to spare. Almost everything was at their disposal for hunting the beasts, including the dead. Corpse giants are, as the name suggests, gargantuan dead Lemurians whose rotten flesh yet lives. More than likely, they are the product of experiments with blood, which congest into large pustules on random parts of the dead body to form massive vulnerabilities. It highlights the importance of blood in their reanimation, the lit candles on one variation's back indicating the additional role of ritual in their creation. The stitchings barely holding the giants' bodies together further suggest that they are Frankenstein monstrosities, with parts sourced from multiple individuals. This comports with their internal name as flesh golem and helps explain why they are apparently so hard to control, many impaled through the back with balls and chains plus heavy weights to make them more manageable from how they swing them around. It doesn't work. The only purpose in creating a simple-minded and violent golem from corpses is to make it an unliving weapon. To that end, hooks, hatchet heads, clubs, and cannons have been crudely grafted on to make the monster more deadly. This wouldn't be the only example of cobbling together a monster from corpses and setting it loose in the labyrinth. One enemy is regarded as a cramped casket, but in the dungeons, there is no casket, simply a legion of corpses amassed together. This dense mashup of flesh is happy to absorb more bodies into the whole, as seen when it grabs us, and it is just as willing to eject them as hazardous projectiles. With so many found in groups, they are no doubt an artificial creations like the undead giants. In rare instances, we will even encounter puppeteered remains, individual corpses whose severed parts are loosely held together through arcane power, making it easier to claw at foes. That last example may need to be discounted due to the glitchy nature to the parts rising up as hostiles on top of the rarity. However, the overall pattern makes clear that the Mirians frequently resort to necromancy to bolster their numbers. These hunts were simply that dangerous an affair. They couldn't afford to waste anyone or anything. Naturally, the noble class eventually took the lead on these efforts. Historically, elites proved their physical capacity to govern through hunting, and it was no different in Thumru. If the country had any sense of noblesse oblige, the aristocrats couldn't afford to let beasts run roughshod over their subjects, especially if it brought them lording over the territory into question back in the Queen's court. As a result, we can spy high-class Thumerians meandering about the dungeons. Thanks to their affluence, they could afford the best weapons and training, and that extends to trick weapons. The Thumerian descendant wields a shotel which can split in half for dual wielding, the boss deftly throwing both around like boomerangs in spite of old age. There was no worry that a noble couldn't handle himself in the field, assuming that he was able-bodied. Even then, aristocratic hunts had plenty of ways to bridge any gap in physical strength. The Themerian elder chooses to wield a staff instead of the trick show tell. With the tap of his cane, the old man can instantly teleport a short distance, with the orange crystal at the tip of his staff acting as a catalyst for fire conjured in the shape of various weapons: hooks, spears, lances, scythes, morning stars. The noble has obviously mastered arcane arts, infusing the power of fire into a gem to create a tool for sorcery. At full power, he can create waves or explosions of flame with each swipe of his arsenal, ram the staff into the ground and impale targets from underfoot, or simply hurl the standard fireball. This is what allows the elder to hunt beasts without needing to sprint and jump around lugging around heavy metal like the descendant, though the old dog does show that he can still make the occasional flashy twirl into the air before an attack. Given the gap in age between the elder and descendant, these are probably ancient magics developed early in Thumru civilization, perhaps passed on from us. Joining them was their armies. Warriors of the ruins patrol the tombs alongside the grave keepers. Their chainmail and scale armor confirms that they were better equipped than the Watchers, though it has been reduced to a tattered remnant now. They also
I like now that I moved the stuff on the lost fire arts to create the Watchmen earlier too, because now we have this thing where I casually mentioned the idea of maybe the fire arts being a carryover from Is, and it's like, yeah. Now that I've got that mentioned earlier, that doesn't seem so random anymore. Anyway, let's move you. All right. There we go. Let's start this from here again.
Given the gap in age between the elder and descendant, these are probably ancient magics developed early in Thumru civilization, perhaps passed on from us. Joining them was their armies. Warriors of the ruins patrol the tombs alongside the grave keepers. Their chainmail and scale armor confirms that they were better equipped than the Watchers, though it has been reduced to a tattered remnant now. They also wield a soldier's armament, carrying swords and shields, great swords, or morning stars. But their war is currently against beasts. The army men loined use beast teeth for their morning stars and commonly employing flame weapons. These veterans of battle are covered in serious injuries, which explains why we can loot the highest number of blood vials of any Themerian from them. That likewise explains the yellow backbones and inflicted organs we can acquire, these gray-haired veterans suffering from the beast scourge more than most. That must also be why they covered their zombified faces with full cowls, like in statues, preventing comrades from noticing the signs of disease in their eyes.
Right.
The fact that they are still human at their age is impressive. One of the warriors shoots a crossbow, which stands out when most Themerians are employing some manner of firearm. The only other example of this is the Elder, the crossbow included among his repertoire of antiquated melee weapons to form from flame sorcery. This implies that the soldiers are of similar age to the Elder, the crossbowmen just too set in their old ways to adopt a rifle or blunderbuss. It is no wonder that the warriors look so tattered and drained. But that also implies that earlier Themerians didn't have guns. Despite all the quicksilver available for bullets, there is no indication of this adopting firearm technology. Guns were probably only developed later in Thumru, albeit still much earlier than on the surface as seen today. Seeing the potential to injure beasts with silver, the silver bullet and tool with which to fire it were pioneered along with all of Thumru's other silver arms. The will acquired in Thumru Ihil suggests that this began early on, as do the capital's additional trick weapons. Besides being a callback to a mech from Armored Core, for answer, a game Hidetaka Miyazaki directed before Bloodborne, the Rider Palace combines the principles of swords and firearms into one. The result is the ability to dual wield guns without
Okay. I was like, Hide? No, it's still Hidetaka. Okay. Hidetaka Miyazaki, okay. Okay, yeah, Rider Palace is fine. Let's just do that from here then.
The Rider Palace combines the principles of swords and firearms into one. The result is the
Rider
ability to dual wield guns
Palace.
without compromising melee at close range. The trick weapon relies heavily on the wielder's blood inch, so only the capital's nobles with their high-quality blood would realistically wield it. The weapon's description further suggests that it is the weapon of knights, which is also true for the Chickage. Down there in Thumru Ihil, the weapon is merely regarded as a blood blade, using the blood from slicing the palm as the weapon is sheathed to coat it when subsequently unsheathed. Once coated, the blade becomes more deadly, assuming that you possess the appropriate blood inch. The one qualifier is that this art is a curse which drains the wielder's life force, taking more with each additional coat of blood applied for strong attacks. The nobles leverage their vile blood for sword and gunplay, a practice which dates back to fairly early on in Thumru civilization. The history of the hunts have subtly changed with the passage of time. Just above the capital, in cursed Thumru defilement, the continued incidents of Chickage and Rider Palace betray the noble hunters still concentrated nearby. These types continue to use silver weapons like Logarius' wheel as well as Ludwig's holy blade, reinforcing the sense of chivalry among this group. This isn't too odd, since they were Thumru Ihil's first line of defense. Of course, the royalty entrusted knights to guard their home. To that point, it is there where we can acquire Blood Rapture, a rune expressly associated with those serving the queen in its description. That dungeon is also where we may find the Lake Rune, which highlights this idea of being a barrier of protection from physical threats. The noble lords of Thumru in Depth 4 were a living rampart. The added defilement lends more importance to the retainer's presence, as evidenced by the wheel smothered in vile blood. But things continue to change as the hunters branch out with each additional expansion to the labyrinth. From lower Thumru on up, citizens begin resorting to cruder weapons like saw spears and cleavers, though they haven't given up on silver. The knight's sword simply replaces the massive holy blade with the stone kirkheimer. With regards to quicksilver, the rifle spear similarly borrows the principles of the Rider Palace, commoners imitating nobles from the tombs they migrated from. By the time we reach central Thumru, the knight's weapon has evolved to a gentleman's cane. Even that threaded cane has fallen by the wayside as of the most recent layer. The Hintertombs naturally go through their own developments. The lower Hintertomb is where we find a stake driver, a creative if crude invention, much like the rifle spear just one depth below. It plus the hunter axe in the above Hintertomb indicates a subtle shift in rural thinking, treating the beasts like men. After all, the axe is the classic executioner's weapon for beheading, with stakes similarly employed for impalement. Hunters in the Hintertombs therefore have a tendency to slay their prey as if they are criminals, sinners, even. We can see this in the local runes found in the lower Hintertomb. By themselves, Deep Sea and Stunning Deep Sea might have reflected Hintertomb citizens' desire for protection from the frenzy and poison around them. But when combined with the inclusion of Great Lake and Great Deep Sea, there is clearly a fixation on the body of water dividing man from the Great Ones. The Hicks, with their eye-collecting priestesses, probably look to the cosmos for insight, similar to us, and view the beasts as an impediment, a barrier to communion with the unseen gods. This unique perspective on beast hunting in the secluded tombs is reinforced by the Labyrinth Madman. By all appearances, a Themerian warrior, the Keeper Madman is nonetheless susceptible like a beast, those sharp nails occasionally foregoing a weapon for a corpse to munch on. With speed and strength to match, the Grave Keeper must have become one in all but superficial form, hence the madness plaguing him. But that madness can also be a sign of insight. Despite every variety employing melee, the enemy provides quicksilver for bullets, and we may also loot the sage's hair and wrists. He has what constitutes sacred, enlightened blood for Themirians despite the beasthood, likely in large part because they manage to remain outwardly human while mentally degenerating. And even though this kind of enemy is common in most root dungeons, the madmen are especially common in the hintertombs among the story dungeons. Without a doubt, Thumuru's Fringe promotes this kind of transformation, encouraging residents to become anything but a hairy beast for divine inspiration. Religiosity and superstition aside, hunting was a core function to every part of the ruins, as ubiquitous as blood drinking. The result was death being another universal constant. Even ignoring the graves, there are plenty of coffins laying around the ruins, ready to inter either hunter or prey. On that subject, many use large, reinforced wood boards in place of the normal lids, presumably to secure the casket against the beast occupying it. When sealed and placed into carts, these coffins are inevitably tied down with rope to keep the things from moving too much, so the watchers are definitely anticipating the possibility of the corpse coming back to life. The fact that so many empty coffins are just lying around, watchers hiding in the things to ambush intruders like us, speaks to how widespread the beast hunt became. To celebrate with blood one night and hunt or be hunted the next day, that was the Themirian way. Possessions are flying birds. Death may have always been around the corner, but life was more than just hunting beasts. We never get to witness a proper Themirian home, but they must have private interactions and relations with each other to keep society afloat. Since we never receive a glimpse of this, we can only imagine the day-to-day troubles of the gravekeepers when off duty. Does the constant expansion of the tombs everywhere create property line disputes? Does payment in coin lead to robbery or taxation? Does the hunt demand they find their own meat to feed their families? Much of our experience in the Chalice dungeons is tailored to the public face of the ruins culture. Even then, we can surmise that it wasn't always beasts for the Themirians to contend with. The public gardens gave the watchers a break from repetitive tombs, and there were other things to experience for both their thrill and alarm, such as the various wildlife. The Gravekeeper Scorpion is perhaps the most peculiar. This arachnid is bursting with venom, yet also capable of launching fireballs. This raises eyebrows, since the Gravekeeper name seems to come from how the enemy looks like a keeper transformed into a scorpion, with patches of beast fur along its entire body. But the creature itself isn't a beast, and the Gravekeeper aspect covers just the top of its shell. The scorpion has its own mouth and eyes, with those of the supposed Themirian appearing superficial rather than true body horror. We also see mother scorpions with tiny young on their back, each and every one ordinary. Taken together, the species seems to be just a scorpion. Perhaps the creature simply evolved to look like a half-beastified Themirian to lure and prey on the hunt for bodies to slay or bury. Alternatively, feeding on the Gravekeepers causes their form to manifest on the exoskeleton, organs filtering out the poison in the blood and flammable elements they wield. You are what you eat, as the saying goes, and there are sure to be plenty of hunted keepers to scavenge in the labyrinth. Another bizarre case of fauna is the hole digger. Rarely, we will come across holes in the wall of the dungeons creating burrows, sometimes with the burrowers still inside. The slug-like entity with minuscule arms at each end appears to use its acidic bile to melt its way through the earth, while its elastic mouth tentacles help whip and ultimately drag prey into its gaping maw. Some of that dense, melted rock gets devoured along with the flesh and blood, the lead in the rock apparently extracted as an elixir from the body we loot. More impressive, however, is how the head uses the body almost like a skin suit, capable of pulling itself through the insides and popping back out the rear end to attack any predators coming up from behind in those narrow tunnels. There is simply nothing like this hole digger, and like the scorpion, it is no doubt a pest for the Themirians to exterminate. The waters weren't safe either. Whenever we explore the sewer lines, it isn't uncommon to come across the skeletal remains of some large, eel-like creatures. These cryptids are found nowhere on the surface outside the fishing hamlet, where we just so happen to encounter a great one. Therefore, it appears as if the marine animals have been the result of arcane influence, exposed to great ones or kin from its watery habitats, or at least feeding on some part of them. Whether this transformation made the creature itself a kind of kin, it mustn't be too dangerous if we can only find remains in shallow waters. With a head fit for ginormous eyeballs and a long horizontal beak to open wide, it is certainly fit to pick up any small fish or refuse that might flow through the pipes. Maybe that beak would be more dangerous for gravekeepers assigned to patrol the sewers or beasts escaping down them, but we only explore the shallow drainage chambers with the rotten remains, so we never have to confirm its threat. Granted, not everything was so deadly down there in the labyrinth. Large rats covered in tomb mold and disease pustules are hazardous, but ultimately just vermin that tend to lurk in the sewers. Along with them were smaller critters we only seen as cadavers, such as miniature wild canines or other kinds of rodents, which the Themirians apparently like to grill and eat. Being deep underground, we can encounter nothing avian, though the horned grotesques adorning the tombs do possess feathery wings like birds. Such angelic wings might just signify transcendence, an angel symbolizing the link between man and God as a divine intermediary. But at least some element of society must be familiar with birds, since the nobles have plumage colors. In all likelihood, bird feathers are a rare commodity that aristocrats import from the surface, sending Themirians out hunting. Indeed, for all their seclusion underground, the Themirians weren't strictly avoiding sunlight. Life as gravekeepers simply didn't demand burrowing beyond the layer of earth overhead, though cut content opens the door to facilities above ground under the right circumstances. The state arguably needed to keep up to date with happenings on the surface in order to steer future civil development. That also means Thumru Ihil engaging with diplomacy when possible. Exploring the story dungeon, we come across a watcher with a fair number of dogs, breeds otherwise exclusive to Hemwig and Yahargul. It is possible that some noble is importing them from a menagerie, showing off the exotic animals he could purchase from the surface. We do see more of the Yahargul dogs in deeper depths of this dungeon and root dungeons in general, commonly escorting the gravediggers as they search for new parts to expand. The Hemwig dogs likewise appear, if more rarely, in Thumru Ihil. Without a doubt, the Themirians are trading for canines and using them for their purposes. Of course, first-hand experience tells us how the Watchers are generally hostile to outsiders' presence, but that would be a decent society's response to any invader. No Themirian is going to appreciate would-be grave robbers, and their insular nature guarantees that they would be extra suspicious of foreign visitors. Only through careful interactions between the underground and the surface does this alien culture do business. But still, that shows a willingness to build relations. When it comes to hostility, the Themirians are just as vicious with each other. Throughout the dungeons, we will come across chambers littered with dead knights or piles of bones and armaments, specifically the arms of the labyrinth warriors. Add in the accompanying cannon setups in many cases, and we get a sense that there are traces of long-past battles that the Themirians fought amongst themselves. With such a rigidly conservative society in constantly dire straits, it is no surprise that Thumru is plagued by infighting also. The death toll beggars belief with how many litter each dungeon, whole piles crowding corners, victims often appearing horrified. They at least have a place amongst the graves. In the sewers, we encounter masses of highly flammable oil gel, which crawl around the floors or ceilings, ready to ambush passersby. Taking basis from the Dark Souls crawling carrion, the enemy seems to be the byproduct of the human corpses, their bones and shining coins mixed up in the black mass. Based on the color, it might be a grudge specifically, the collective wills in the blood pooling together in the body pile coagulating into that dark matter twisting itself into all sorts of shapes to tear apart the living. Bodies left to die and be forgotten in a grimy sewer, never to receive a proper burial, would understandably irritate the blood. And with how especially miserable deaths and improper burial are common cause for resentful earthbound spirits to emerge in Japanese folklore, it doesn't appear to require all-consuming malice to persist after death, just a sense of injustice. Between all the death and overgrowth, outsiders can hardly be blamed for thinking this civilization a ruin. Despite the attempt to make cities out of tombs, they are still just that, tombs. It is hardly an encouraging life for a gravekeeper. Not everyone wants to slavishly protect long-dead gods for seemingly no gain. Only reason that the Maru has held together for so long is the strong respect for tradition, perpetuated in part by the long-lived nature to many of its elite. In fact, the hoarding of the most arcane blood is likely the cause for that longer life. They're happy with the current arrangement, so nothing changes. But when the commoners try to express their grievances and resist, they're always too weak to overthrow their sated masters. It is a deep legacy of feudal infighting that discourages any major deviations from the status quo. The Mirian civilization is simply dysfunctional, and that regular unrest reveals the limitations of its queen. Having a child is divine. From her place in the royal capital, we see that the Mirian queen spends her time attending to the graves, praying to one of the especially large monuments when we walk in and disturb her. This is to be expected, since she is essentially the chief gravekeeper. What isn't expected are the wooden hand stocks the boss wears. She isn't a prisoner. Early into our battle, she recognizes that we are a serious threat and breaks the stocks with little effort, arming herself with a large dagger on hand. If someone intended to restrain her, they would have accounted for her immense strength and deprived her of her weapon, both combined allowing her to fly across the battlefield in order to close the gap with a deadly strike. Rather, the shackles were clearly a symbolic gesture, something the royal had acquiesced to during safety. Why choose to put on the binds of a convict or slave? Because it sends message, but to whom? When we encounter the queen in the story dungeon, she is visibly pregnant, and the baby can be heard crying throughout the preceding boss fight. The child's periodic wails always precede arcane energy binding us momentarily. For one attack, the queen lurches and quickly rubs her belly as that power builds up in her womb. What follows is a circle of energy rising all around them, lifting dirt, rocks, and eventually us into the air. And after telekinetically spinning us around briefly while the boss lurches even lower, we get slammed into the ground, and she returns to normal. All of this is clearly done by the unborn baby, not the queen. The fetus is upset at our hostility and trying to protect its mother. Being a baby, its attempts are mild and crude, but it is still an immense show of power for a fetus in the womb, enough to overwhelm the mother with the quickening. Combined with the fact that we can hear the baby crying from inside the womb, and there is no doubt that this is an infant great one, and we can surmise who. From the start of our journey through the city of Yarnum, we can hear the same baby cries faintly in the background, assuming that we possess extremely high insight. We eventually track these cries to within a baby carriage inside the Nightmare of Menses, where we almost immediately encounter Murgo's wet nurse. The obvious implication is that the baby is Murgo, currently under the hostile Great One's care. And before we take lift up the tower to these two, we come across the queen, praying while looking up to the boss room. In this instance, she isn't visibly pregnant, and returning to her once the wet nurse is defeated and Murgo stops crying prompts the Themirian to bow before leaving. Add on top that, we cannot perform the ritual with the Great Themaru Ihil Chalice until we acquire the living string, a unique item solely available in the Nightmare of Menses before crossing the queen and Murgo. Without a doubt, Murgo is the child harbored by the boss in the dungeon. The Mirian royalty has conceived a Great One, and this isn't the only attempt. Like Innis, we can acquire red jellies revealing experiments to engineer Great One babies in Themaru Ihil. The royal capital has a particular fixation on this practice, and it is surely because they have both the means and motivation. If their gods lose children in general, then Themaru's elite probably intend to supply them the lost children, if only to remain in good standing with the divine. And if their queen can conceive a child, then they likely hope to improve upon the method or success rate as a form of self-advancement in high society. As the red jelly showcase, consistency has not been achieved. Why then has the queen succeeded where so many have failed? It isn't from a Great One blessing her womb. Blood Rapture mentions serving a queen who harbors a blood baby in the description. This suggests that the child born was produced from the monarch's blood, not necessarily a god. If so, then her blood must be unique among high society. Blood Rapture is proof of the special quality to the queen's blood, her servants utilizing the vitality from the blood obtained with the rune as a substitute for it. She also weaponizes this blood of hers in battle. From the start, she performs arts to fire her it as spears from the palm. Once she takes up her dagger, she begins using it like a blood blade, stabbing her own palm to shoot up the blood spears from underneath targets. She can even use this to cover the blade in blood and extend its length into a proper sword. Stabbing this blood sword into the ground causes bloody geysers to gush all around her. Even on the defensive side, she instantly collapses into blood with a prayer to teleport a short distance or summon clones of herself. These are arcane abilities unique to her, and every single attack inflicts a rapid poison effect. She has blood more malicious than any other, malice sweet enough to enrapture her vassals and kill a drunkard. This must have been cultivated from a diet of the highest quality blood in the labyrinth, something only the queen could claim priority for. We can see that the effects of this special blood extend beyond just a virgin birth. The description for the Yarnum stone obtained after the queen's defeat reveals that her consciousness is only resting. We do encounter her in dream worlds, with any damage suffered causing her to hold her head before collapsing. It appears that her will is lucid dreaming similar to the Great One's, allowing her to persist after death. Her fragile state as, effectively, a ghost with more cognizance leaves her unable to endure combat in her dream form. But if she has collected moral will in the blood than any noble in the capital, then a kind of immortality should be possible, as evil spirits of the labyrinth demonstrate to a lesser extent. That will inherited from others rather than cultivated by her own would also explain why she shows capabilities otherwise only exhibited by Great Ones while not becoming a Great One herself. It is borrowed insight sustaining her vitality, not her malice, and certainly not her enlightenment. And because of that, it can conceive an enlightened baby within her. In short, the Mirian society is structured so that the queen may imbibe the most malicious blood in the dungeon until she achieves a state where a blood baby is conceived from the collective will. Murgo is just the latest Great One born of this process, with Themaru Ihil planning to offer the child to the gods for favor. In that sense, the queen is the mother of God, similar to the Virgin Mary in Christianity. That more intimate relation with the Great Ones is reflected in her clothing. The monarch's white dress takes obvious inspiration from the depiction of the vampire Lucy Wazentra from Francis Coppola's film adaptation of Bram Stoker's Dracula, befitting a blood-drinking superhuman woman with corpse-like pallor. But besides giving this vampire queen that apparitional aura when we meet outside the dungeons after her death, the dress design matches a Victorian wedding dress. The Themirian monarch presents herself as the Great One's bride, carrying their child. This sends a message to, at minimum, society of her contribution to the cause and legitimacy by divine right. More broadly, it may inform the gods. Essentially, Thumuru wants to garner the Great One's attention after
Yeah, no,
acquiring the
I'm
desired
pressing where
baby.
these goats
This would
are
explain the
going.
choice for every Thumerian queen to inherit an old name generation after generation, which our exploration of Thumuru Ihil's story dungeon reveals to be Yarnum. The Japanese katakana for Yarnum is an anadrome rendering of the Sanskrit Munaya, meaning the saints, more specifically, sage aesthetics who achieve enlightenment through self-realization rather than by reading scientific or religious texts, such as the Buddha. The terminology perfectly encapsulates the ethos to transcendence, with the holy men becoming the great gods high above. But in the context of Thumuru Ihil, Yarnum likely holds some significance in the oldest language, translating to bride, or mother of God, or some other expression of her readiness to provide the Great Ones a child. Whatever the exact meaning behind the name, the consistency across generations of queens places greater emphasis on what the queen represents more than her individual identity. Taken together, the queen wears shackles because it shows her submission to the gods and becoming their bride, conceiving for them offspring. The meaning probably runs much deeper than that, in fact. The ring of betrothal is looted from a chest in Thumuru Ihil root dungeons, suggesting that the capital inherited the practice of blood covenants from us along with it. Yarnum already wears a similar ring, proof to the gods that she will harbor the special child to gift them for the covenant. And recall that this marriage contract demanded a special blood for the special baby, a blood baby, if you will. Taken together, and Queen Yarnum has repeated the experiment, which is had ultimately formulated in the Age of Old. Seeing the spider kin around Thumuru Ihil, as well as most dungeons, the royals and nobles almost certainly sought transcendence, which an infant great one could be used to bargain for. Just as the old gods, yet human, created children to receive a share of their predecessors' insight into greatness, so too with Thumuru. And the shackles hearkened to the gravekeeper's role model. Symbolizing keepers of the old lords for outsiders is not the mask, but the hat they don atop it, no other piece of apparel worn around the empty armor quite capturing their image. But according to the mask's description, that iconic element serves as a sign to others that they are some kind of sinner. This would make eternal guardianship of their bodies a kind of punishment of imprisonment from the Great Ones, but for what crime? The answer may lie in the fact that the watchmen are all specifically watchwomen. Besides the generally feminine silhouette, the keeper symbol is the stereotypical pointed hat worn by witches. The kanji for Maja literally renders witches as magic, evil, or demonic women, which complements the notion of sinners. One of the enemies we encounter is also a bonish hunter using a female player model, internally named Carla, which derives from Germanic to ironically mean free woman. Dark Souls 3 would later reuse this name for Carla, a prisoner and bona fide witch.
Yeah, that is funny how Carla ends up being a reference. Yeah, again, this is what I tell you. Like, a lot of times from software, they will do these things, and they're just inside jokes, right? Like Carla. If you did look in the Bloodborne game files, you'd have no idea why they went with Carla, beyond just the fact that, oh, haha, it means free woman and she's a prisoner. But it's like, they used it before for a witch character that's never named in game, but the devs remembered it. Like, it's just one of those things, you know? Okay, sheep, get on there. Go on, get back on screen. Go on, all of them are like clumping up around the rock. I don't know why they're deciding they're gonna all hump the rock now. Oh yeah. Anyway, it's definitely still module. Okay, Manger. I wonder if it thinks it's French or something. Well, it doesn't really think at all, does it? Anyway, back to where we were at.
Whatever the keeper's crime, it appears limited to only the fair sex. With that in mind, there is only one crime related to casting magic that is unique to women and of primary concern to us. In all likelihood, the keepers of the old lords are the women who broke the marriage contract with her husband. The men of us commoditized their women on the promise of their blood's potential to produce a special child, which families could use to bargain with their radiant predecessors for the secrets of transcendence for them all. If those women failed to deliver a blood baby, then it was a waste of everyone's precious time. Can't become a god if death takes you first. What better punishment for this sin than to purge the women's impure blood with flame? If those witches can't help them become great ones, they can eternally sniff out grave robbers for after they did. The fact that this is a duty left otherwise to their dogs speaks to how much is looked down upon not performing during these arcane blood rituals. In that sense, the brides were slaves to their civilization. And with that, the full picture of Thumuru's origin comes into focus. Everything the Proto-Thumerians did was because they observed that it was what their masters wanted from them. Why become gravekeepers? Because the Great Ones left watchmen to protect their corpses. Why make their king a woman with special blood? Because the Great Ones used women to conceive blood babies. Why dress the queen as a shackled bride? Because the Great Ones treated their contract wives as slaves. Why call every queen the same name? Because the Great Ones recognized the meaning from their human days. It is no wonder that descriptions emphasize how the Watchers tried having their own ruler in the end. The most they could muster for independence was choosing a woman with the best blood for pleasing the old lords to make decisions. This entire time, the tribe's thinking has revolved around their master's wishes. They don't want true independence, just their god's attention. They want to join them in heaven, finally be free of their burdens of gravekeeping. All of this is the source to Thumuru's dysfunction. Declaring the existence of a king as the name of the capital wasn't an act of rebellion, but declaration of subservience. They have never been a proper country, just an organized cult dedicated to escaping this earth. Whenever anyone tries to break free from the—
I feel like I should mention fate specifically, because I talk about that earlier, the idea of taking fate in their own hands with the idea and the concept and the symbolism of the hunter. I think that's important to point out that sort of irony there.
The elites who primarily benefit from the dependency quash it. It is faithful service for selfish ends, drunk on a dream, no different from every idiot. This is all at the core of their civilization, starting from their monarch. Even as generations and time passed, the Thumerian queen, the Thumuru Ihil, continued to preserve the culture by inheriting an old name. Much might change under every queen's reign, but their roots would stay the same. In some respects, Yarnum was a figurehead, the power invested in her conditioned on her capability as childbearer. She could never escape this fate if she wanted to retain a hold on power. Thus, the blood banquet can never end. But even if a new queen was installed based on her blood quality, that still made her invaluable to the culture, and thus afforded the best protection. The shadows of Yarnum dress in tattered black robes with skin the same color of darkness, obscuring their features. This wraith-like appearance, reminiscent of the Nazgul from Peter Jackson's film adaptations of The Lord of the Rings, is more than just an artistic liberty by the developers. During our first encounter with 3 of them as a boss, the shadows begin stretching their limbs to unusual degrees, much like the spider skin encountered in the dungeons. Their appearance thus seems to be a result of transformation through Arcane means into an entity of cosmic darkness. The reason to sacrifice their humanity is so that they can better fulfill their duties as royal bodyguards. Defeating the boss rewards us blood rapture, implying that the so-called shadows of Yarnum are servants to the Queen Yarnum harboring a blood baby. Their role as her royal guard is obvious from their locations. Just as she appears in the royal capital for the story dungeon, they crop up occasionally in Thumru Ihil root dungeons. The boss encounter takes place in the Forbidden Woods, the shadows making their entrance out of an unsettling fog from the gate to Birgenworth. At Birgenworth, we enter the Moonside Lake where we will first meet Queen Yarnum after another boss fight with Rom. And before we can see the queen again in the Nightmare of Menses, we must first get past a small army of shadows. Like her shadow, they follow wherever she goes, sweeping the general perimeter for threats. This is why they wield basic armaments, medieval maces and katana, and use candlesticks to perform simple fire arts. They are Thumerians, dedicated to protecting their queen. This is in large part because they are enraptured with her blood, compensating with a rune while they await their next payment for service. However, the shadows fail their duty. They are nowhere to be seen when we face Queen Yarnum, and we aren't the only one. She cannot rise again. A possible ally for that final floor of the Chalice dungeon is a hunter summon simply called Queen Killer. There are many identical hunters we can encounter throughout the deepest root dungeons, but this one nameless man is identified as such for presumably committing regicide. The only story dungeons in which we can use a bell to summon him are the Thumru dungeons at depths 4 and 5. And while both instances take place before we face Queen Yarnum, both are also simulations of the past. If the man became a Queen Killer, it took place before our experience in the dungeon regardless. In that case, the hunter...
This needs to somehow be changed up. Yeah, something nice, short, and snappy that will be a better transition. And maybe this might need... Yeah, this might need something new to lead into this. I'm not sure if this is ready. All right, well, we'll move on.
A possible ally for that final floor of the Chalice dungeon is a hunter summon simply called Queen Killer. There are many identical hunters we can encounter throughout the deepest root dungeons, but this one nameless man is identified as such for presumably committing regicide. The only story dungeons in which we can use a bell to summon him are the Thumru dungeons at depths 4 and 5. And while both instances take place before we face Queen Yarnum, both are also simulations of the past. If the man became a Queen Killer, it took place before our experience in a dungeon regardless. In that case, the hunter most likely earned his name from hunting the same Thumerian queen that we do, potentially with his help. Put simply, in the actual events where we weren't present, Queen Killer hunted Yarnum in her capital. With her death also came a separation from the baby in her womb. One might think that this would lead to Murgo also perishing, but this doesn't seem to be the case. The Yarnum stone looks like a porous mass of solidified blood, similar in nature to bloodstones and crystals. But upon closer inspection of the menu graphic, it is easy to make out the shape of a fetus within the supposed rock. This brings to mind a lithopedion, or stone child, formed when a fetus dies before birth and calcifies during an abdominal pregnancy. We do see bloodstains on the queen's dress consistent with profuse bleeding from the abdomen during a miscarriage or similar fetal complication. Cut dialogue further reveals plans for the priest in the fishing hamlet to mistake Yarnum's stone for the baby of another Great One Kos. Without a doubt, during the development of the Old Hunters DLC, this was intended to be a Great One child. It would thus appear that Murgo was already dead, at least in one sense. Indeed, a blood baby should have its form manifest from the combined wills in the mother's blood, creating a new life with a new will and new blood. This presumably is what allows the unexperienced fetus to emerge with transcendent thinking. But because this isn't a normal pregnancy, there are bound to be more risks of error even if the blood does generate the child. In Murgo's case, the body couldn't develop to the stage of full viability, instead hardening like we see with bloodstones in blood after death. This leaves the baby in the awkward state where it never consisted of a proper body to die with, but cannot progress past the point of just living blood either. Factor in the fact that Murgo's will reach his Great One status, and we have a vigorous soul manifest in a static vessel. The Latin Murgo does mean to sink or drown, so it is easy to see how the instant transcendence and unconventional origin caused the developing baby to be consumed by the blood it was forming in. Whatever the reason for this faulty fetal development, Murgo is effectively both alive and not alive. The crying we hear is an arcane projection of the child's internal voice, hence occurring even while still within Yarnum's womb. Even as a stone, Murgo is aware of its surroundings to some extent and can exert incredible power in conjunction with its mother. However, the fetus will never come to term in its current state. This doesn't appear to concern Queen Yarnum. The fact that she hasn't forcibly terminated the pregnancy after showing the bloody signs on her dress speaks volumes about her position on the matter. Perhaps it is simply her desperate denial, praying to the gods resting in those graves for salvation so that she doesn't lose face as a failure. But more likely, it is simply the love of a mother for her unborn child. The infant Great One demonstrates a protective affection for its mother, constantly crying while separated from her in the Nightmare of Menses, and Yarnum in turn pursues Murgo. Clearly, the queen was satisfied if the two continued life together in their peculiar arrangement. But fate had other plans. Yarnum was killed, her consciousness lingering in the cosmic realm. Despite stemming from her blood, her Great One child doesn't appear to possess the same degree of immortality. After we defeat the queen in the dungeon, we are able to claim the Yarnum stone without consequence. The child is, in the best case scenario, forced into a catatonic state upon the mother's death. In the worst case, we have slain them both. Either way, Murgo's appearance in the Nightmare of Menses must simply be the stone body that wasn't killed by Queen Killer, hence we never properly see the baby in the carriage. And whether or not the child did fall into regular dormancy, the baby was deprived of a mother and lacked the ability to prevent itself from ending up in the Nightmare of Menses, where it most certainly regained the awareness to cry incessantly. Hearing her baby's distress draws Yarnum's consciousness to the location, setting her on the journey where we cross paths. With her own body inoperable, she and her guard traverse the dream realms to Birgenworth before us. When we catch sight of the queen at Moonside Lake, she had likely been peaceably beseeching Rom to reveal the nightmare hidden from everyone in the cosmic realm. At an impasse, she weeps inconsolably whilst continuing to pray for salvation, even as we arrive to kill the spider. By the time we take notice of her presence, she herself notices the red moon arrive. We are then warped to the entrance to Yahar'gul, text directing us to find the baby of the nightmare now that the secret has been revealed. It is possible that this is a message from the queen, as she is the only one around to teleport us out of the Moonside Lake. Yarnum does have the motivation to send us after the child in light of her helplessness. She is also presumably coordinating with her guards on Earth via cross-planar telepathy, similar to the Great One's communicating runes. Assuming that the text reflects only the general sentiment, the monarch may well be using her limited power to aid us for her own sake. Regardless of how we transition to Yahar'gul, the queen and her guard enter the Nightmare of Menses and reach Murgo's tower before us. The queen once more can only pray for a proper hunter to slay the Great One blocking access to her child. Defeating Murgo's wet nurse and silence the baby's cries, the queen gives us a final deep bow of gratitude before fading away. Her consciousness may be read to rest in peace. We can only imagine how Thumru has reacted in the meantime. Her shadows are still loyal to the queen, but that might be out of guilt for allowing an assassin to slay their ruler on their watch. It is possible that the country has collapsed into infighting again, or that a new ruler has already taken the last Queen Yarnum's place and begun working to birth another blood baby. Whatever the exact circumstances, history informs us that
Stupid
Thumaru
sheep.
is unlikely to see radical change. They're a nation forever inheriting the will left by their ancestors, by no one's
Oh my
choice
God,
but their
why
own.
is it raining
Chikich equals
again?
1,000 views, a female name with sense of elegance, similar to Evelyn. Written in different kanji, name means
God, I
blood
hate
shadow.
these fucking
Rakuyo
sheep.
equals fallen leaves, evoking the autumn days of the year, gracefully approaching death. Written in different kanji, name means comforting
this is stuff
unknown.
I was thinking of
Sojo.
adding for
According-
Canehurst, right? Just different things on the different. This I'm gonna have to ask some friends about, because I'm like, I'm not sure if this is necessary, because these admittedly these are some obscure kanji, so I could be very off on this. This one I don't need to. I've already added that to Yarnum, so. And this is for the old lords. I didn't end up needing to clarify anything there. Okay, so overall, my thoughts. There are definitely some things. I feel like transitions are the big stuff. I didn't notice any terms that seemed to be overused. So at least that's nice. I wasn't hearing like back-to-backs with lots of different stuff here. That was the term I was really worried about. Where are all my sheep? Why are all the sheep gone? Where did all the sheep go? Are they all hiding behind the rock? Why are you all fucking behind the rock? I can't stand that. Anyway, but yeah, it honestly seems like it's pretty close. I feel like I could probably have this done over the weekend and posted by Monday for sure. Now, yeah, this I want to definitely check out. But yeah, I feel like with everything rearranged as it is, and with me moving the stuff on the Ring of Betrothal to is already, I think this stuff's mostly done. It's just a question of how much do I have to change for Canehurst. Because I tried my best to not have to explain corruption, and therefore I have to remove that from Canehurst and then move it there, right? Like, I feel like what I've done here, just talk about the malice, the malicious wills, and the build-up, right? It allowed me to basically talk about corruption without the term actually being defined yet. I think I can then just make it where I can reference this back with Canehurst and be like, okay, remember that thing about the malice and stuff? This seems to be how it's defined. How to define the corruption, right? Chapter names go hard. Yeah, I tried going with Sumerian proverbs. I thought that would be very appropriate. All right, so I'm gonna see. All right, can these sheep stay on here? Just no, go back on screen, you dumbass sheep. You better come back on screen by the time this guy comes around again. You dumbass sheep. These dumbass sheep. I can't believe they did that to me. They're the worst. But yeah, so far I think this is the worst part. I think the transition between these sections. Now, granted, I don't think these should be one section, so I think it's good that they're separate sections. But the transition needs to be a little stronger. Because it almost feels like it's not really its own section there. Yeah, this one's fine. This is a good transition. Get the queen, then we're like, okay, we're going to focus on the queen. I like how the queen is sort of saved for the end here. Let me just quickly grab this while we have. Don't you... Oh my god, the sheep have met... Woo. You know what? I'll take it. Fuck it, I'll take it. The stupid sheep want to go, like, hump each other in the corner of the screen there. Fine, whatever. Alright, so, I'm engaging in diplomacy, right? Yeah, overall, I think we should be good. I'll do like the final draft. I'll make sure to do a check on any like terms, make sure some stuff isn't being used too much more. But I feel like these 23, technically 24 pages, is pretty good. Hey, you just missed the Tumor review. Super evocative, great work. Well, thank you. All right, so we're gonna switch over now. We're gonna do at least one more. Let's switch. I think Fire Monks. So I just added all the stuff here. Yeah, I think listening to Fire Monks would be good.
Although north of Landel had become forbidden lands, the conquered territory still needed to be organized into a new province of Marika's growing empire. Niall and his men were allowed to return to their castle under the Erdtree stewardship. Meanwhile, the smaller fort was handed over to Arganthy, donning the ruler's mask to affirm lordship. The reason for her assignment was likely a reward for service in the post-war cleanup. The lord dresses in the Murray robe, implying that she either is a Murray or is another official elevated like them. But since House Murray already has an extant head, she must wear the black mantle for separate reasons, no doubt still related to an official's grim work for the royal house. Most likely, Arganthy worked closely with Marika on...
Alright, so I will say this, Nobre. I feel that Tumuru is going to be really good for people because... Like, I wasn't so sure when we were going through that last section with the Queen because I was like, oh, it feels like really late to do this. But now that I've done the rearrange and had the Watchman stuff move to the beginning of the analysis, had the ring stuff already seeded back in is now. And now we have, like, just focusing on, like, the actual Queen stuff, like the really relevant Queen stuff at the end for this last section. Yeah, I think it's come together really well. So I'm very happy with this. Like I said, I just need to double check and make sure now. It seems like it's literally just the details now. Am I using certain terms too much? Are there certain phrases that I'm getting a little repetitive? I did hear it listening to this. I did not notice. But, you know, I'll just double check, you know, make sure. Because sometimes, you know, sometimes that stuff is not something you'll necessarily hear per se. But at the very least, it tells me I've broken things. Why is it raining so often? Like, what the frick is with this stupid fringe? This, I guess we are close to Liurnia, so Liurnia weather has to fuck me over. But anyway. Overall, I'm very happy with this. I think it's going to be good. I think Blood Saints is also going to be very easy to do, so I should have that one done next. I don't know if we'll release an Elden Ring analysis in between it or not. We'll just have to see how that plays out, but let's get to this draft already. Yeah, I think it's gonna be really good. I mean, considering that it was a little longer than I expected it to be, I think it's come together very nicely. And I think I've handled it in a way where even though we haven't technically, by the reading order, we haven't covered Healing Church, Bergenworth, Mensis, we haven't covered Loran, we haven't covered... what's another thing that would be relevant? I guess choir, even to some extent. Like, there's a lot of topics here that I have to kind of dodge while trying to, you know, still give a thorough and comprehensive dissection of it. And I think I managed to do that pretty well. I'm a little worried about just kind of talking about, like, oh, ends up in Mensis or something like that, like the Nightmare of Mensis. So I'm gonna have to think about, like, you know, like, what have I done in other analyses? Because I've definitely mentioned school, you know, the School of Mensis and the Nightmare of Mensis and stuff thoroughly, because it's kind of unavoidable. You kind of have to just kind of be like, yes, and then School of Mensis does this thing and gets the red moon and yada yada, right? Like, like me mentioning the ROM stuff. I think, you know, that's something where I kind of have to mention that stuff, but I think that's fine because I think that's easy enough to establish. The Mensis stuff, I'm worried. I might need to flesh that out more, but for the time being, I think it's okay. I'll think it over in another draft. What are your thoughts about the Great Hollow shifting Earth so far? Really got the impression it's delving into the cutting gifted tribe, given the architecture there and stuff we see tied to them. Yeah, I assume the way of cutting thing is somehow going to tie into this stuff with that. My impression overall with it from a lore-wise is that I like the idea there being like this giant underground cavern with a bunch of crystals that's attracted a bunch of the cuckoos and the sorcerers, and for some reason the godskins, interestingly enough. And you got like a Rhea Lucaria sigil stuff there, and then you have this tower where for some reason we got Godefudrik over there. So like there's a lot of interesting stuff going on with the new area. I just don't like the stupid rift. I think the fact you have a giant ravine that can instantly kill you, and it's so obnoxious to navigate because it'll spawn you on the other side of the ravine, but the path around it is like so long, and then you add on top of that the night rain stuff that actually can screw you over. Like, I think that rift is just way too obnoxious. Like, I don't know if they need to add like wooden bridges or what, but I feel it needs a little bit more to make navigating through and around it like just not as painful. It's just really awful for me. But listen, that's just my like one day. Maybe I'll get used to it after playing it some more. Anyway, back to Fire Monks.
Although north of Lingdal had become forbidden lands, the conquered territory still needed to be organized into a new province of Marika's growing empire. Niall and his men were allowed to return to their castle under the Erdtree stewardship. Meanwhile, the smaller fort was handed over to Arganthy, donning the ruler's mask to affirm lordship. The reason for her assignment was likely a reward for service in the post-war cleanup. The lord dresses in the Murray robe, implying that she either is a Murray or is another official elevated like them. But since House Murray already has an extant head, she must wear the black mantle for separate reasons, no doubt still related to an official's grim work for the royal house. Most likely, Arganthy worked closely with Marika on executing the giants. Even with magic, the god needed the bureaucracy to help enact her will. Arganthy apparently headed up these efforts. Her handiwork pleased the queen, so she was made the feudal lord of the Guardian's garrison. Naturally, the royal couple bestowed her title with the responsibility to continue watching over the fell god. Her small castle thus became a bulwark against invaders of the giants' summit. Abattis have been set up all along the choke point to shore up defenses. Some of the giants' pets have also been repurposed as guard animals, the big-headed dogs around the fort wearing collars and helping defend the choke point alongside their smaller brethren. The rest, still uncollared, run wild with the crows on the summit. There are also briar stakes surrounding the fort, left over from the war or subsequently created with the lord's expertise. Everything was set up for her to arrest and punish anyone attempting to reach the forge with the last giant.
Breaking news, Loki hates holes. Well, what can I say? I am a guy. Though I know some who are into that. All right, back to it. Where the hell is... There we go. Hello? Hello? You functional?
Naturally, the royal couple bestowed her title with the responsibility to continue watching over the fell god. Her small castle thus became a bulwark against invaders of the giants' summit. Abattis have been set up all along the choke point to shore up defenses. Some of the giants' pets have also been repurposed as guard animals, the big-headed dogs around the fort wearing collars and helping defend the choke point alongside their smaller brethren. The rest, still uncollared, run wild with the crows on the summit. There are also briar stakes surrounding the fort, left over from the war or subsequently created with the lord's expertise. Everything was set up for her to arrest and punish anyone attempting to reach the forge with the last giant. Of course, there is only so much that can be done by a lord without vassals. And so, the Watchers' fort doubles as the headquarters for the Flame of Ruin's new guardians. That group was initially recruited from veterans in the war. The oldest of these Watchers' incantations was invented during the Giant War to protect themselves from flame. We likewise acquire the prayer text from a corpse sitting cross-legged at a bookshelf in the small archive locked behind a barrier. This archive preceding the main burial chamber to the giant conquering hero's grave was obviously used to document the hero's history and arts for future generations to study. And the pioneers in prayer were most likely priests. The Grand Lift of Rold doesn't welcome visitors from Lingdal to the mountaintops with tree sentinels, but clergy, identified by their aprons. These clerics wield tree staffs, representing the Erdtree in one hand but a bowl, representing the cauldron's fire in the other, linking them with the flame watchers whose devotion must balance both. Marika left Arganthy her men of God to safeguard her godhood, hence the hero graves hanging banners bearing the two-finger sigil. However, the fact that a prayer asking for flame's protection was formulated speaks to the hearts of those heroes. The sigil for it and future fire monk incantations vaguely resembles the two fingers crest, but was more ornate, with the sun seeming to follow an orbital path between the two rings. The royal capital's clerics had become entranced by the light of flame, not the Erdtree, devoting themselves entirely to its power. These dual loyalties never crossed, but these devotees' contributions to the war were nonetheless premised upon drawing closer to flame, embodying it. It is no surprise then that they would volunteer if not elect to stay. They wished to continue gazing at that oh so beautiful flame. And since Marika required guardians, the priest soldiers would become warrior monks under Arganthy's leadership, merging prior martial prowess with their new faith. The foundation of this religion were the fire giant's red hair. The braided hair is used for the incantation catalyst, featuring the fell god's eye. The basic prayer book similarly has the red hair used for a tassel, whereas the more advanced prayer book bounds all its pages in the hair, emblazoning the fire sigil at the center in the process. The emerging order understood that the giant's latent power remained in the hair, which was probably how flame, protect me, was discovered on the battlefield. The two fingers priests must have taken tufts of hair from the first fallen giants, quickly realizing ways to protect soldiers from others as a result. Carrying on that legacy, the new order of monks could harvest hair from the executed like leaves on a forest of trees. And as we see, they have used all that hair to empower all their key products, monks tying the braids of their giant seals around their gauntlets so they can instantly cast incantations in one hand without a second thought. But unlike the hair's owners, they channeled flame as its watchers, warners to all about the danger of the fell god. The Lord did not shirk her noble duties either. The obvious concern with leaving pyromaniacs to watch over a flame is that they would become so engrossed as to unleash it themselves. Marika's trust, however, was not misplaced. Arganthy expertly hid the fact that the fell god yet lived in the last giant, compiling prayers that encapsulated the firekeeper's power at her fort, but sharing that prayer book with only select members given the rank of prelate. Like Arganthy, prelates were expected to lead the lesser monks, the fatty shape of their armor conveying the example to be unmoving in the face of fire's temptation. Their helm likewise portrays them as exalted individuals, akin to enlightened Buddha. These were the sort whom the Lord could trust with learning such powerful fire magic. The rest needed to prove their reverence of flame was met with equal parts fear. This not only meant receiving a basic prayer book, but also constantly reminding each other of their priorities. As Arganthy's prime instructors of the faith, prelates took the lead as living symbols. The third mind's eye on their exalted face, plus their knee guards, alludes to the fell god as the source to their nirvana. But they're also the only ones permitted to wield a great hammer styled after blazing flames. The ginormous weapon doesn't normally deal fire damage, but it most certainly...
I'm not sure how I feel about this. I added this to get more info in here, but it feels almost repetitive considering we have like just 2 paragraphs ago mentioned a lot about that, so... Yeah, I'm moving the face of temptation. Yeah, like this stuff about the armor, this does not, this I already mentioned, so I was like, yeah, I feel like I've already mentioned that before, so yeah, I also feel like there's probably a section later where we talk about stuff about, like, you know, fear and things, so I don't know, I feel like I may need to break this up, but let's listen to it on its own, but I will mark it being like, hey, can you, like, think about what you're doing with this, so one more time.
As Arganthy's prime instructors of the faith, prelates took the lead as living symbols. The third mind's eye on their exalted face, plus their knee guards, alludes to the fell god as the source to their nirvana. But they're also the only ones permitted to wield a great hammer styled after blazing flames. The ginormous weapon doesn't normally deal fire damage, but it most certainly possesses genuine firepower, which they unleash with their skill. The prelate's charge showcases how the monk can draw out flame as they press the hammer through the ground. This ability to hold fire yet rarely used reflects their mastery to be entrusted with fire arts, with the hammer's crushing weight capturing the weight of their mission to themselves as much as the delinquent monks who may need a reminder. As a reward for their dedication, the prelates can cast incantations from hand without a prayer seal, or channel their faith into the flames spouting from their cup. They were the ideal to strive for, and one of the many warnings in every monk's training. Flame, cleanse me causes slight burns to the caster, purifying the body of all manner of illness in order to inspire the desired fear. That same principle applied to make their uniform black iron armor wrapped in red cloth, symbolizing bright flame burning their bodies to a crisp. That reasoning was even behind the fell god's face emblazoned on the lesser monk's breastplate. Even their special incantation seal, adorned with the giant's red hair to improve their prayer's power, was at its core modeled after the fell god's eye depicted as the Eye of Providence. Everything is a reminder that watchers should always fear flame, no matter their fascination with touching it. Arganthy was herself captivated by the flame of ruin, using the giant's seal to cast fire incantations. These include a spell derived from the last giant. But as a guardian, she has no need for visual reminders. Rather, she looks to fashion the one-eyed shield in order to let its trick flamethrower mouth exemplify the terror of the fell god for all her followers to remember. No monk should be fooled into thinking that they were above the risks. But accounting for that, the monks are free to enjoy fire as they please. The prelate's helm has a cup for billowing large flames atop it, showcasing both fire's power and their immense faith when teaching their underlings. Those underlings are proud to wear crowns and wield weapons made in the shape of those beautiful, flickering flames. Strong attack with those mock flames, in fact, roused the warrior monks' fighting spirits, putting a spring in their step. Their disciples hoping to become masters of fire through faith. Their dedication to the cause while maintaining a certain distance is why they are allowed to be buried with other veterans of the war. We can acquire the fire monks' ashes from a chest in the standard catacombs, and the hero graves have monks and prelates among the gravekeepers, their spells and equipment lootable from the area. Clearly, these soldiers were trustworthy flame monitors for Marika, as illustrated by her kingdom building a lift just as extravagant as Dectus despite being accessed from forbidden lands. As the statues for that rolled lift showcase, they are tree sentinels in their own way. But unlike the Erdtree guards, the Flame Watchers couldn't simply recruit from among the masses. And yet, the Forbidden Lands have been training new acolytes to their monastic order. Certain Flame Guardians remain garrisoned within the fort. Rather than monks, these soldiers dress as modest citizens, wielding a torch pole utilized by soldiers on watch along with a giant seal like Arganthy. With only Whirl, O Flame, to their name, they are clearly recent recruits still learning under the prelates and their leader. The monks in training start out with grunt work at the fort before being permitted a wider area to watch and the proper uniform. In that case, the fire monks have been receiving a steady flow of new members, at least until the Shattering. Where were these recruits coming from when the lands were forbidden? The cloth garb of simple citizens is typically along with the guilty hood for various corpse models, the watchers in training replacing it with the guardian mask. This suggests that before they became defenders of the Flame of Ruin, they were criminals. Supporting the prelates and monks in abundance are thorn sorcerers. These individuals wear similarly simple garb, but with a red veil, covering the eyes gouged by the crown of thorns over top. To show their allegiance, they wield either smaller branches smoldering with flame or larger ones fully set ablaze. The former is fodder, of little note. But the weapon we receive from the latter is Staff of the Guilty, a small animal impaled on the thorny branch tips as a sacrifice to create red glintstone. With these blood crystal staves,
I was thinking, let's see. I feel like I want to mention the fact that they have thorns on their hands and feet as well somewhere. Yeah, I have to think about this more on how they do that. Anyway.
is Staff of the Guilty, a small animal impaled on the thorny branch tips as a sacrifice to create red glintstone. With these blood crystal staves, they cast briars of sin and punishment sorceries. This is because, in their eternal darkness, the blinded guardians discovered the blood star, inspiring them to put their faith in the power of blood and thorns. They may follow the Fire Monk's model, but it has been perverted by heresy. And the description to these thorn sorceries confirm the sorcerers to also be exiled criminals. The Erdtree Kingdom banished them to this place, a prelate employing a whip of similar thorns to encourage a more intense kind of instruction from them. In short, most of the Flame Watchers are sinners, sent over the years since the original population of priests took up the duty. That is why Arganthy wears the black mantle over her official robes as Lord. Much like House Murray, she was put in charge of punishing criminals, in her case by drilling the duty of guardians into them. This is perfect for someone with the name Aganti, a probable corruption of the Sanskrit Agashanti, defining the expiation of sins. A life monitoring the flame of ruin was these sinners' atonement. Presumably, this was the fate for petty criminals who don't resist arrest, thereby saving them from execution. The number blinded must therefore denote subsequent disobedience in the line of duty. Only those tame few still wearing the guardian mask benefit from a crown without thorns. They may think themselves king of their own fate, but they are just big-headed pawns to a truly grander purpose, deserving of mockery. The guardian's garrison humbles them in the hopes that they abandon their sinful ways and become watchers. Reforming the guilty was likely a major shaper of the Fire Monk's practices. Just as the Buddha famously convinced a notorious serial killer to renounce his ways and become a monk, the priests who became the prelates have leveraged their experience to become the exile's chief role model. On top of everything else they wear, the ranking monks keep the image of a burning key emblazoned across their chest, doubtless to symbolize the key to enlightenment through them and them alone. The prelate's helm, with its exalted visage, has become the models for fireballs used as a main source for lighting when away from their facilities. Even the rhythmic beating of the chest, which they are so often found engaging in, serves a reflective purpose for others as well as themselves. Ritual to focus on being the weighty stone fixed on defending the flame that they embody. The prelates were the promise of fulfillment in a higher calling, a walking propaganda piece, as are arguably all evangelists. But every carrot needs a stick. The fire monks guided their flock as much through fear, in ways besides the typical thorns or atypical one-eyed shield. Despite the name, flame chariots are more accurately war cars, essentially a kind of small two-wheel tank. Concept art indicates that it is operated by 3 individuals total, though only the main driver exposed at the rear is visible. The tank is equipped with 1 or more flamethrowers, taking the shape of tongues for a fire giant's terrifying face. The visage shield depicts the same bronze face, and its description clarifies that the exaggerated features, making it appear more like a devil function as a reminder to fear the giants and their flame. Basically, the shield and the chariots both exist to instruct others, and we just so happen to find the latter with the fire monks. Without a doubt, these were designed to help guide the faithful through fear of the consequences, much like with Arganthe's shield. In fact, both the visage and one-eyed shield have a trick mechanism to shoot fire like the chariots, so they must all come from the same source. In all likelihood, these inventions were developed with the help of Castle Sol. The Farum colonists are no stranger to mechanical or flamethrower technology, their arsenal commonly including ballista or fire sprayer emplacements, the latter modeled on dragons, naturally. With their expertise, it is more feasible for mere monks to realize their complex tools for instruction. On top of that, surviving astrologers now living in Sol would likely be lending their intelligence to such a project, as they had surely done for the magic pots, which trolls defending the summit throne. And as we see on the flame chariots, there is a golden bird crest emblazoned beneath the giant's head. The fire monks don't associate themselves with birds, but Castle Sol does have Stormhawk companions to be their symbol. Overall, it would appear that the chariots and shields of bronze or white stone were Sol's design, and the fire monks' endeavor also seems to have received the support of Leyndell. Outside the Guardian's garrison and on the Flame Peak, we can come across groups of burning slugs. This is strange, since the species appears to originate from Gelmir, a majority encountered bathing in the volcanic lava flow. Why find them so far away, atop snowy mountains? The obvious answer is that they were imported, during the time that the Erd Tree and Serpent God remained allies. But a warrior monk hardly needs a pet, and neither do they make for good war beasts. Instead, they were probably sent for research and development. It isn't surprising to see rats as vermin in the castle, but the same can't be said for the cluster of ordinary slugs in one room of Sol. Once again, this is an anomalous habitat. But if these burning slugs whose flame was somehow extracted for the chariot project, then their presence wouldn't be odd. After all, the fire monks can't share any of the giant's flame with outsiders, so they requested another source be supplied, both parties keeping the leftover specimens. Marika unsurprisingly approved of these shows to reinforce fears, which were definitely needed. Fyrak was the greatest prelate to ever live, his faith deeper than any other. That manifests in the Surge of Faith skill, the cup on his head spouting out the smoldering flames like other prelates, but without limit beyond the user's FP. And yet, that head has been impaled on a candlestand. The description reveals this to be Byrak's own doing. He grew concerned about the complacency of the monks under him, seeing how lax they were on while on duty. And so, to prove a point, he severed his own head, showing how even he may die while the flame lives on, as well as the enduring nature of true faith. They must take care to be wary of fire and devote themselves more deeply to their mission. Seeing the fire of his faith on the candlestand engraved with their figures was supposed to inspire the monks, and perhaps the shock value did move many as Byrak intended. Becoming a guiding light to dispel ignorance would be fitting, as the name actually references a Valaku, the traditional oil lamp used in South India for religious rituals and bearing similar symbolism. Nonetheless, this event admits to cracks in the duty. Since Byrak's time, we see how the monks meditate in the forge's direction while a prelate does the same, briar sorcerers similarly staring or prostrating themselves. There is a deep fascination with the giant's forge, and the group of prostrators around the chest storing the secret prayer book insinuates the attention isn't just on monitoring, but respecting the cauldron for deriving the fell god's arts. The balance between fear and accord to a fire monk's philosophy looks to be tilting far too much in the wrong direction. We find the Crandial vessel candle stand on a lone corpse in a dark chamber of the giant conquering hero's grave, locked behind an inked statue seal. If anyone did worship Byrak's countenance, they haven't paid homage for a long time. The monks have slipped entirely into the abyss of ignorance, and they have no intention of seeing the light. Whether or not Arganthy is aware of this, she has done little more to help than hoard the giant's power for herself and the prelates, so she
I think the locked is unnecessary. I think just saying it's a seal gets it across anyway. Yeah. Alright. Moving on.
Whether or not Arganthy is aware of this, she has done little more to help than hoard the giant's power for herself and the prelates, so she too might be compromised. There are plenty of reasons for abandoning duty, even putting aside the collapse of management from Leyndell after the shattering. Sinner or saint, it was a rough life being a flame watcher. Most of the time, the guardians loiter around in the cold for nothing, with so few threats slipping through the royal capital. The most exciting thing in their lives, normally, is cooperating with local trolls to control the wildlife population on the summit. From witnessing the thorn sorcerer's corpses being chowed on by the wild dogs and crows, that level of excitement quickly turns deadly. And for what? Keeping a flame out of the hands of everyone, to a large extent even themselves? Where's that fulfillment in that? Most were lucky to even see the flame summit depicted on the rolled medallion, let alone the real thing. The Watchers were privileged to be so close to the giant's forge, so close to laying their eyes on not a red gem, but genuine embers within the cauldron. It is no surprise that many have been gripped by the beautiful flame's seductive allure, and that temptation is pushing them to act. Despite a hero of Zamor remaining in the hero's grave as a gravekeeper, the flame mania has turned the radicals against the ice sorcerers. We see the Zamor village has been reduced to ruin, yet its warriors remain, patrolling the rubble unperturbed. The cause of this peculiar setup can be inferred from the briar stakes past the village, with a group of briar sorcerers led by a prelate beyond them. Apparently, the prelate decided to lead a raid on the natives and exterminate them like the fire giants. The resulting conflict destroyed their home, but the heroic fighters rebuffed this sudden assault, forcing the prelate to abandon the operation and turn back. Karma has the last laugh, however. One of the hostile stone golems meandering the snow valley has taken up a sniper's position to block any passage through the narrow road home, leaving the prelate banging his chest in frustration as they simply look on, standing at an impasse. It is a small mercy that the Zamor aren't inclined to pursue, especially when longtime allies suddenly betray them seemingly just because they prefer the cold to a flame's warmth. At the end of the day, the Watchers were always playing with fire. Fascination with flame made the early Erdtree priests most qualified to monitor it, but also the most at risk. The last giant may have stood to dissuade any greed, but they still went on to recreate his people's fire arts from just corpses and first-hand experience. The secret prayer book decorated with some of the fiery red hair in that familiar swirling pattern. It wasn't just the incantation seals. The entire faith was based upon using the latent power of actual giants of the Fell God. It is no wonder that the monks tolerate the Thorn Sorcerer's heresy when everything about the order was unorthodox. With only outliers like Thyrak keeping everyone tethered, the monks would inevitably drift into flaming fanaticism. As it stands, their integrity is
That's
quite...
another thing I didn't notice when working on this. This we mentioned earlier with the hair already, right? So yeah, I'm gonna have to rethink that, and like, because I didn't realize I already mentioned that detail and stuff. So I want to include the thing on the explosives. So let's slow things down and turn on do this. Yeah, so this one, this thing, it's gonna need a lot more. This second draft on Fire Monks is gonna need a lot more. It ain't in a good spot. There we go, that's an option too. Ah, damn, it was too late. All right. Something like that, yeah. Something like that. Something like that. There we go. Did I ever play the OG Demon Souls or just the remake? Just the remake. I've only played that one. So at some point I would like to get an emulator working and play the OG. So at some point when there's like a special occasion for that, maybe. Something like that's also kind of cool. I think this was definitely better. All right. So yeah, I think we should mention that because Yeah, this is not gonna help. Oh wow, that's convenient. All right, let's turn on stealth again. There we go. All right, so I got shots of that. I have to include that into the mechanism talk, but I have to rethink a lot of the stuff concerning what we have. Oh, dude has a ballista on top of a ballista. Guy's ready for everything. Anyway. So, I think I'm gonna have to redo a lot of that stuff regarding the prelates that I was trying to add in. It's not good. I have already a lot of that information. I also have the stuff on the red hairs. I have to probably get that removed or rearranged or what have you. Like, just in general, I need to rethink what I was doing. It wasn't as simple as the other stuff where I could just insert it. I'm very happy with I'm very happy though with like everything else at least. Just everything else seems more or less okay. Maybe I would want to think how I'm talking about some of the references to other media with the names and stuff, but I don't know. Nothing stuck out to me as like egregious, at least. And it's relatively short, so that's good. All right, so last one. Yeah, let me save that. There we go. Let us do one more. No, not the bats. The bat one I keep finding new stuff where I'm like, oh, I can add a little bit more about the bats, so I'm doing that. But that one's like a short, like 2-pager at most. Like, it's really not that much. I don't remember Dupre Perfumers even being done as a draft. I don't think I posted it, at least, so I think that one still needs work. Where is it? I don't have it on my short list. Okay. My bad. Let's do Omen real quick. Since this is the last really short one, right? Like this one, like this one's 7 pages, a little longer than Fire Monks, but pretty short overall. All right, we'll give this one a re-listen, and then I think we'll be done for today.
To this day, the horn-sent Grandam beseeches her precious divine beast to unleash its wrath upon Marika's children, the entire tribe she rules, for betraying her people, cursing them even with her dying breath. What she doesn't realize is that her prayers were already answered long ago. Among those bearing vestiges of the Crucible, the Omens stand out. Like Hornsent, these individuals were born with gray hair and charcoal skin. Unlike Hornsent, however, their horns cover any part of their body, not just the head. They also grow far larger and stronger, adults capable of bending solid iron with the force of their swings. The name Omen Child is also telling. Indigo normally refers to an unwanted child loathed and shunned for whatever reason. This unwanted is likewise used to denote an omen with terms like Imabi, invoking a death anniversary or similarly unlucky day worth mourning. And the kanji is used in words like abominable, the very term the Grandam used to describe Marika's children, and the curse she wishes upon them. Altogether, the Grandam's dialogue appears to be a clear-cut allusion to the cursed Omen, who were born to Marika and implicitly every one part of her golden order at the time. Their curse is defined by the evil spirits possessing them. The Omen's Merc mask captures the image of elders with a disgusting face of horns haunting their nightmares, which we can witness the Omen experiencing whenever they are caught sleeping. The cursed blood pot captures Mog's memory of being attacked like mad by spirits during his childhood for having the cursed blood of an Omen. Certain Omen do breathe vengeful spirit fire, occasionally exploding it from their entire bodies to unleash fully formed wraiths. Every night, the cursed spirits harbored within have tormented the Omen with sadistic glee in their dreams. And these spirits also happen to be responsible for their similarities to Hornsent. This makes sense in light of how horns reflect spirituality. It wasn't just the surviving Grandam. The collective grudge of all the old Hornsent, those privileged with the time to cultivate their own horns before Mesmer's crusade, has produced a curse after death, transferring their spirits and all the accompanying spirituality into the developing bodies of every child conceived in the Erdtree Kingdom. The density of these Omens' spirituality from the curse explains the sheer number of horns manifest all over their bodies. That magnitude of spiritual life energy likewise justifies the monstrous physicality of those bodies. In the Erdtree Kingdom's brutal genocide, Marika and her citizens accrued a backlash, which was inflicted upon their innocent children. Whether it occurred immediately following the first days of the crusade or many weeks, months, even years later, the curse must have been sudden and all the more horrifying, especially for Marika. Never would they have expected to face karma like this. Wasn't the dishonorable crusade and its implications supposed to face from memory? Naturally, the Eternal Queen responded to this incident swiftly and harshly. Omen children have been labeled as another corruption to the Golden Order. The classification seems to have corresponded with a mandate to excise the curse. According to the Omen Baron S description, every unsightly horn on the newborns was cut off. Since these contain the spirituality, it is no surprise that they don't grow back even into adulthood, with those dehorned omen unable to unleash cursed spirits in any form. By removing the lot of the curse from its source early, the evil didn't have time to take root. The result are omen with only residual curse remaining in the blood, the spirits far too few and weak to do more than haunt dreams. As for the spirits unleashed with the cut horns, they are evidently absorbed by the omen bairn, a statue of the dehorned baby fashioned as a sort of amulet. The idol acts as a surrogate for curses in place of the real child or parent, hence allowing the owner to weaponize the spirits contained. It was invented to protect parents as they performed the inglorious deed, and in more ways than one. Most omen died after their horns were cut off, presumably from the blood loss. Given the number we see covering the average omen's body, it would be taxing for an infant to suffer such severe mutilation. However, the death toll wasn't just an unfortunate side effect of trying to save children from the curse, it was by design. The bairn is more accurately a water child, a term for children born dead, which became associated additionally with abortion and infanticide during Japan's Edo period. The statue is similarly a reference to the water child memorial service, performed in honor of such dead children for, among varying motives, fear of retribution from the baby's vengeful spirit. While the figure in the Buddhist ceremony is typically Jizo, it is nonetheless an idol used to protect the parent from their sin of murder. This statue is the explicit memorial service, honoring the baby's passing while redirecting the grudges released in the process. The child's death was a foregone conclusion.
God, these
Unlike the misbegotten,
pronunciations
Marika had no
something.
intention to use the omen as free labor. If the crusade was to exist only in shadow, then so too must its consequences fade from collective memory. Therefore, no annal can record a curse upon the entire population. Every citizen, whether noble or commoner, was expected to sacrifice their child for the good of order. Excising the spirits was a small mercy afforded to the omen's cursed existence, soon to be snuffed out. That painful death may well have been the Erdtree god spiting the former allies she betrayed for their obvious retaliation against her. If the stubborn old coots wanted to ruin her children, then they would know what it means to face the golden tree's rejection. The cursed infants may not know grace, but the kingdom wouldn't let them be claimed by the horn scent. Thus, forced to abide a royal decree, everyone under order participated in what was surely Marika's improvised ceremony, parents paying their final respects with this brutal mass infanticide. The bodies were just as swiftly disposed of. There is a graveyard of coffin carriages abandoned on the fringes of Altus Plateau, hidden behind empty Gelmir and the Lux Hill. The ancient golems half buried with them signals that they were responsible for bringing the coffins to that obscure corner. We do see the same golems repurposed by Landel to guard the grand lift of Dectus, as well as the side route for entering the capital. Most likely, the golems were used to pull carriages before trolls became the standard for this, so still sometime during Godfrey's reign. But why send the dead to one remote location on the Heartland, with apparently no intention to return the golems or carriages? Because they wanted to keep the cadavers out of sight, out of mind. And who couldn't citizens of the capital stand to think of any more than their lost children? The tragedy was too much to handle. They simply threw bleeding infants on the body pile and carted them off to be picked off. The implication about the dead is reinforced by the visible consequences of this half-hearted effort. After all, not all omen who lost their horns did die, and evidently, these were included among the body pile. A number of dehorned omen loiter about the abandoned coffins. A few of these have developed a rudimentary sense of civility, putting on ragged cloaks on top of the universal loincloth. But overall, they are seemingly a community of wild men, residing amongst the carriages where they grew up. This holds ominous implications for how the monstrous babies subsisted long enough to reach adulthood. They surely benefited from the ancient golems protecting their territory from other scavengers or similar threats, at least until those golems broke down from lack of maintenance. Cannibalism does also befit the savage stereotype, though these would be savages of so-called civilization.
What are you trying to say here, Xavier? Could you also mention that the horn scent also have the same practice for their own children? You mean, with the bairns? Are there bairns in... Are there bairns in Shadow of the Erdtree we can collect? I actually don't remember. If so, then yeah, I can allude to that at least, or include a mention. Let me see. We got something like that. Cool. Yeah, because I don't remember there being any. Yeah, that completely slipped my mind if that exists. All right, moving on then.
Zone making. And yet, the society in question knew not the fate they condemned some of their children to. Indeed,
Memorial
countless
dolls,
parents
yeah,
surely grieved
okay.
with heavy hearts, maybe willing to have accepted a deformed baby if not for the government proclaiming it taboo. They just wanted to forget how they betrayed and abandoned their children in such a
They made the dolls as like actual memorials for their dead and everything after, after the crusade. Yeah. I can allude. I can at least make a allusion. Yeah, I think I can make an allusion to it. Yeah, I have to read the description to like double check like the specifics and try to come up quickly with what the scenario would be. But yeah, I can make an allusion and try to connect it historically.
This way,
Yeah.
for their own peace of mind, if nothing else. But guilt has a way of eating away at someone. Sitting on one of the abandoned coffins is a noble lord. Considering the anomalous location,
Gotcha.
this person of authority and resources must have been one of those parents racked with remorse over the incident, eventually deciding to track down their child's grave and secretly go alone. The intent was probably for the aristocrat to find some closure by facing the full severity of the family's crime, maybe apologize to whatever was left of the offspring and provide a proper burial. What the noble didn't expect was a possible reunion with their dead baby, though if parent and child did meet, the interaction clearly wasn't amicable. These were the monsters the capital created. Omen weren't just limited to Altus Plateau. We can spy a dehorned omen serving Godric in Stormvale Castle, with plenty more omen tracing back to the demigod's army. From this, we can infer that omen were also being born in the penal colony, descendants of the colony's overseers from Altus. A curse knows no borders, so even there on the frontier, those with the grace of gold in their eyes suffered from it. However, there are no signs of a mass grave on Stormhill. When word came to dehorn and dispose of the babies, the overseers abided the first part. However, it would seem that they kept the survivors cared for as slaves, hence the collar with chain around their adult necks. Even with banished humans and misbegotten working so long, the penal colony hadn't yet finished construction. Thanks to harsh conditions slowing progress, the castle needed the labor. Why waste perfectly good manpower? And who would stop them? They were far away from the heartland. The children could thus live as their parents' property. By the time Landel found out, the state would just have to accept the circumstance. It wasn't as if the royalty back home didn't bend the rules themselves. Royal babies didn't have their horns cut off.
Hey, at least
Instead,
you got
they
a
were
dog
banished to
out
the
of
sewers
it.
beneath Landel, where they live on to this day. This was done without anyone's knowledge,
Not
so
the
the
worst
Erdtree
type
royal
of
family were trying to
slavery,
keep this
clearly.
contravention of Marika's decree under wraps. This includes Marika herself. Morgott and Mog are both omen and demigods, almost certainly twins. When approaching the divine tower of East Altus harboring the two's great runes, we are whisked into a shadowy dimension hiding the fell twins. The bosses look like generic omen beyond one's weapon inflicting hemorrhage. But given the magical nature of this encounter and Mog's later identity,
I do love how this is the second time where I'm like, okay, we have 2 children of America. They're probably twins. Like, they're not ever explicitly twins, but they're probably twins based on everything we know. I feel like it's funny that I just kind of go over there with those, like, you know what, they're very clearly close in age, same time that they're born, they're probably twins.
as the Lord of Blood, these omen twins are probably intended to be the demigods in their youth, proxies created to protect the actual twins' great runes in the tower. And Morgott's great rune affirms that he is a member of the golden lineage in its description, leaving no doubt that he and his twin were born to Marika and Godfrey. Taken in total, we can determine that the entire royal family weren't so keen to give up their children. Even if their gold was corrupt, there was still a loving bond formed when a parent lays eyes on his or her child, no different from the commoners or nobles. And as the ones enforcing the decree on their subjects, the allure to make themselves the exception is always tempting rules for thee, not for me, as the saying goes. Most important of all to Marika, those omens still bore the blood of her tribe. And so,
Yep.
the royalty have gone to whatever lengths to keep their progeny alive if nothing else. In fact, banishing them underground for eternity probably wasn't their first choice. It would be absurd for the royals to think that helpless newborns would survive in the sewers if the intent was really to save their lives. No one foresaw the situation on the plateau's fringe, after all. Their plan's only realistic chance was for the omen to be at least a few years older and theoretically self-sufficient. Indeed, how could anyone know the faces of the spirits haunting omen without socialized omen around to describe their nightmares? Morgott exemplifies this delay and abandonment. The future omen king of Landel owns a talisman pouch from the finger reader who had been his wet nurse. Even if only received upon becoming king, it implies a past relationship, which is only possible if he was raised in the royal court. He also utilizes gold to generate phantom weapons which a young prince in the Age of Plenty would have witnessed. An Erdsteel dagger, Tree's pear, giant crusher, even a Carrion Knight sword from visiting Diplomat's entourage. The man even makes
What?
us face a golden shade of Godfrey in the Erdtree sanctuary before confronting him at the Elden Throne.
Okay, tree spear. It just read it weird because it's a weird compound word. That's fair.
Familiarity with the First Lord's fighting style and unbroken axe insinuating first-hand experience. Godfrey himself shows an uncharacteristic tenderness holding his son's body, calling the boy he hasn't seen for a while by name. The fact that Morgott and Mog have names which their father would recognize belies that they were merely dumped in the sewers as infants. The twins are simply too eloquent to be wholly uneducated and unpracticed in decent society. Morgott started with a relatively normal life, childhood memories he cherishes to this day. The same must have been true for Mog and all the omen born to royalty. Despite suffering from terrible nightmares, the children spent their early childhood years under the family's protection. The god and demigods never intended to give up their precious offspring, curse or no. They were most certainly wanted until they weren't. The way a few omen kneel to holy woman statues in the sewers, there is still a strong sense of fealty to Marika. But her godly majesty won't deliver them from their current fate. Not even the twin princes escaped banishment. Because the toddlers knew a better life and might try desperately to return, they were shackled with gold-powered fetishes that could force them to the ground. This applied both back when the parents first left them behind and in the future, such as when burying Landel soldiers in the catacombs. Looking at the menu graphics depiction of stone crests with stretching roots, this was accomplished by embedding the fetishes into the body, allowing the omen to grow with it.
Fetishes.
Why the sudden about-face
The little
concerning children
fetishes.
if Godfrey is any indication, deeply loved? In all likelihood, it was a response to political pressure from the masses. A generation of omen prince and princesses wasn't going to go unnoticed, even if the royal court never addressed it. Citizens of every social strata played along with the royal decree, much to their own dismay. But when compliance had inevitably been secured with the threat of military force, the people weren't going to accept a double standard. So, as the years passed and the reality of the situation trickled down the grapevine, there was sure to be growing outrage over the blatant tyranny. If omen were so shameful, then royalty should also be ashamed. That outrage would turn into loud protests, and tensions would only continue to rise. At some point down the line, the king and queen needed to address this issue. Some fans might underestimate the concerns of rebellion for a veritable god with a reliable demigod to war on her behalf. But a ruler needs subjects, and the queen couldn't inspire faith if her legitimacy was called into question. Recall that all of this was part of efforts to stabilize her regime after she did receive a serious challenger. After a controversial military crusade, and even more controversial infanticide campaign, an incendiary political scandal was the last thing her government needed. Marika couldn't maintain her firm position with a rebellious population, but violence would only quiet the discontent, not smother it, leaving it to seethe into a bigger problem long term. In the worst case scenario, the entire kingdom would be dragged into an ugly and prolonged civil war. If the god had any political sense, she would try to solve matters peacefully before things reached a fever pitch. Once again, Marika was left to choose between her kin and her hold on power. Was she really going to tear her kingdom apart to protect her family's cursed progeny? No. And so, concessions had to be made. The royal omen were not abandoned all at once. From Morgott's remembrance, we can derive the regal omen
Okay,
bear
I will
depicting a
say
royal
this,
cursed baby with
right?
horns. Because the
This may be crude of me to say, but sometimes when I put things so blunt like that, I do have to laugh. Like I do find it funny. Right? Because I'm trying to get the point across, but like, God, that can be so funny sometimes.
royal infant's horns were never cut. The cursed spirits have been allowed to fester for years, resulting in the
Wait, was she
magnitudes
really
more
gonna
power
do
which the
that?
adult
No.
omen vomit. We see that even as their horns are cut now, new ones simply grow out of the stump. This failure to pull the spirituality up from the root led to many more spirits for the amulet to absorb after the children were abandoned. This implies that the spirituality leaking out was directed, in large part, by the ire the children felt from their parents' betrayal rather than any interference with the curse itself. Unlike those using the normal bairn, the royals did have to fear their children resenting and cursing them. That is all well and good, but the surrogate child is only fashioned after the omen were confined underground, based on the wording of the bairn's description. The fact that one exists in Morgoth's memory suggests that he witnessed one in other families' possession, prior to his own captivity. It is easy to surmise the motive. In all likelihood, Marika tried to appease the masses by ordering more tertiary members of the royalty to give up their omen initially. As a consolation, the cursed were permitted to live in obscurity beneath everyone's feet, the queen only publicly declaring the corruption killed. It was perhaps her way of showing family sympathy, but this position was untenable. Now, even more felt an injustice at the difference in treatment, sure to join the non-royals in demanding more appeasement. This created an ever-growing new faction of opposition within Marika's own family. What space did she have to maneuver at that point? Was she going to call upon Malekith to kill her whole family? Of course not. The threat of destined death was not to be brandished all willy-nilly, especially for this. Slowly, the political casualties built up until they reached the top. Sooner or later, Marika herself had to comply. Morgott and Mog were likely the finals ones banished. It may have been done with great reluctance, but ultimately, the love of privilege and authority surpassed the love of a child. Eventually, the curse did end for the kingdom's new...
Yeah, the final ones. There we go. Finals ones. All right.
Eventually, the curse did end for the kingdom's newborns. Marika gave birth to ordinary demigods after marrying her second husband, and there are no signs of new omen born in more recent times. In the end, the Hornsense malediction was limited by their own spirits. Even if there were enough slaughtered in the crusade to possess every fetus for the following few years, the accursed trough would one day run dry. Once the last bit of wrath corrupted a child of the Erd Tree, the people could rejoice. Granted, this shameful affair has likely become taboo to mention, much like the crusade. Stormvile's omen keep it from being completely lost to history, but the only ones who know the full truth are the priesthood. Learning about the royals was unavoidable to those most loyal to their god queen, being in charge of final rites in the sewers. It is also inconceivable that Trish's laboratory is randomly situated so near the omen on the fringe. The perfumers assuredly extended a soothing hand to build relations with the savages for their research into corruption. Such secrets were holy men's common knowledge. As for the cursed regal scions, life in the sewers was harsh, but manageable. With plenty of criminals already down there, it was a competitive environment for feeding on the capital's carry in and refuse, but not everyone was so seedy as to take advantage of children. One omen among a pile of human cadavers carries on him the basic omen bairn, presumably collected from a sewer resident who previously lost a child to the curse. Perhaps the two bonded as surrogates for the other's parent or child before the miserable conditions forever tore them apart. Regardless, it reveals that the natives could be friendly, especially when the young omen had wrathful spirits to stave off the more unscrupulous sort. Still, survival was a winner's game. To not join the countless dead bodies clogging up the sewer lines, the royals adjusted to their new life of meager offerings, Morgott donning a fur pelt doubtless skinned from some large beast he hunted down there. And, because of that determination to survive, no shortage of those little royals have subsisted to the present day through all the ordeals. For that reason, the sewer area is named the Unwanted and Abandoned Underground, invoking both omen and trash thrown away beneath everyone's feet. The Forsaken Depths and Cathedral use the same terminology, giving the sense that all the trash languishing in the filth is gathering there. The Cursed Ones are just another facet of the culture. The biggest hazard for them now is the aging infrastructure. Parts of the corkscrew staircases lining the main drain have collapsed under residents' feet, broken water flows flooding the steps until it spills over to the Forsaken bottom, thanks to a broken wall in the catacomb. Many of the imps have mindlessly extended their guard area to the pipes and basins outside, attacking any intruders per their programming. Then there is the actual catacomb, sewage flooding chambers, and poisoning the rotten bodies interred. Lendl certainly needs to provide problem areas like this proper repairs. In the meantime, the Omen can adapt, as they have always done in this world which has given them naught. One might wonder why the Omen haven't tried to escape to the outside world, since they can never return home. We see a few small Miranda flowers atop a ravine at the edge of Lendl. These stand out since they are pink, not yellow like most growing under the Erd Tree's rays on Altus. This makes them more consistent with the flowers feasting in the sewers, as if the big Miranda's offspring just made their way out. Adding to that impression, the pink flowers are replaced by one big yellow flower spawning new buds by the time we defeat Malekith. The pink ones therefore probably followed a drainage pipe out to the bottom of that ravine, climbing up the side in search for more bodies to eat. While Omen don't have the roots to dig into the sheer cliff face as they ascend, it is possible that other outlets to the ocean exist. Maybe some already have tried and confirmed those routes fatal, or maybe the lot have grown too accustomed to their lifelong home. Either way, they have settled in permanently. There does seem to be some yearning for acceptance. One Omen exploring the Lendl catacombs kneels before the altar offering a crucible-scale talisman, clearly resonating with the example of hybrid traits as a holy icon. Although their kind are considered to be without grace, the so-called corruption still possesses gold in their eyes. There is potential in their cursed bodies, which the royal family once recognized. But the time of hybrids is already in the past. The crucible sigil manifesting with Morgott's largest incantations pegs his initial training in the midst of reddish gold. But as their shackles showcase, his kind's later captivity echoed the last gasps of the crucible. The Omen incident was the final death knell to the Age of Plenty. What lay ahead was a great many unknowns, and Marika was wise to begin educating herself as she embarked on this new path.
All right. So, I have to mention the sheep herder. I think I also want to mention the possibility of using the information that Marika essentially would have lied. Because I didn't hear that. Maybe I missed the line, but I didn't hear anything about her using that information like a cudgel again, her family using that, where it's like, oh, you know, if you're gonna screw me over, I'll screw all of us over, right? So it's the, that's again how real that is. You can wonder, but like that's always going to be a concern as like a possible threat, where it's like, okay, well now we're in a position where you now are in a position to blackmail me with that information, right? So at some point we're all gonna have to comply on this in order to all be quote unquote happy, right, with this arrangement. But yeah, overall this one seems a lot better, I think, in a better state than Fire Monks, which is funny because it's slightly longer, but it is what it is. There we go. There we go, something like that. All right, so we have a lot of work to do this month. Lots of stuff to cover. Obviously, Tumeru's gonna get the priority here. Let me get the herder thing done. Cannibal. Yeah, we'll find a way to put it here. Sheep, herder, just outside. At edge of territory. We'll put that here. I'll figure out a way to... Yeah, I have one more line's worth to... I like keeping these at under 12, because I think it's a decent length for you guys. I think when I get into 13 and stuff, like, that's where I'm really pushing it. You know? In terms of paragraphs. So I try to keep everything under 12 if I can. This is a double. We don't need to worry about that. We'll worry about that. Yeah, no. God, I hate these stupid machines. They have no idea what they're talking about. Yeah, overall... Yeah, I don't think it's the worst. Guys, let me worry about the comply. Is that the word? Well, yeah, here, okay. Family using info as a cudgel now. That they are on the aggrieved. There we go. They got their grievances. All right, so overall, I think that we've done a good job organizing all this. I think there's enough data for each of these. I'll make sure to include... Oh, I should also add the memorial. Let me mention that. Yeah. Before I forget, let me make sure that's in there. The Baron. Based on Horn Scent, Omen, Bairn. Oh wait, no, just say Horn Scent, Bairn. No, Memorial Bairn. Example. Yeah, because America could reasonably be familiar with what the Horn Scent did, because she was like with them for a time, right? So that's all within reason of her being like, okay, I guess we'll just do what I remember them doing something like this with that, so we'll do that when we tell them to cut off all their babies' horns and throw them in the coffin carriage out of here. Okay, so that covers all that. So it's probably going to be, I focus on finishing Tumeru, then we'll work on Fire Monks. I also want to do a review for the Nomadic Merchants again. I think we did that before, but I want to do it again just to make sure. So do one on Nomadic Merchants. So I think I want those two to be the first. Then either we do Glowmite Queen or we do Omen. I'm okay with either or, but I think Glowmite Queen would probably be better just because Omen does kind of sort of allude to it vaguely. So I think it'd only be fair so that way nobody's like confused and stuff. In terms of the timelines and things as well, everything seems to be good on that front. I don't think there's any like issues or whatever. My timeline is still, so far, it's been reliably consistent with my first impression, so that's cool. Do you mention the Royal Baron depicts Baby Morgoth? No, I don't mention it depicting Baby Morgoth specifically because I don't know if it's depicting Baby Morgoth specifically. We get it from his remembrance, but that's about it. It talks about the royal children in general and them going in the sewers, and of course we see a bunch of those in the sewers. I'm also leaving out the stuff on the ones who have their horns cut in the sewers because that's gonna be part of Moog, because it's like, oh, they're trying to imitate Moog, so they're cutting off their horns in the catacombs and stuff as part of like the cult thing with what's his name, like Esger or whatever. So those guys I've also omitted because they're just not relevant to this. Yeah, I'm not including that in the... I'm not including that Xavier because I don't think it's necessarily supposed to be specifically Moog. It has a tail. Oh, it has his tail. I mean, I guess that depends then on how relevant Morgoth's tail is, but that's good. I'll have that. I'll probably mention the tail thing in actually Morgoth in the Shattering, because that's where I want to talk about the tail in general and him having one. Let me think. Is there anything else I'm missing? No, everything in the sewers is probably covered. I mean, there's Moog in the sewers, but that's like not really relevant here. Yeah, we already mentioned everything about like the disease and stuff down there, right? So actually no, that wasn't there. That was in the nomadic merchant stuff. So that's a separate thing. But yeah, that one would come. Yeah, okay, yeah, I have to come out with nomadic merchant before Omen for sure then. I could maybe mention Subterranean Shunning Ground a bit more. They don't really mention the name of the area too much before I talk about like the Forsaken stuff. I think that'd be fair to just mention a few times so people remember, oh yeah, that's the English name for the area. So when I talk about it as the, you know, the stuff referencing, you know, the trash and the Omen trash. So yeah, I'm gonna have to think about that one. All sizes hide hood. Is that so? That's an interesting choice if they have both the tail and the hide hood. So then how the hell are you making that when he's like, you're not supposed to, you know, he's like down there living. Little baby Morgoth had his own tiny animal hide hood when they try. Like, don't worry, son. Here's the first thing we'll hunt. Yeah, I'll give it a second look, Xavier, but I don't think it's worth mentioning here. It's supposed to be talking about just the royal babies in general. At least the description does, so. Anyway, that'll be it for now. I think that's covered everything that I've wanted to cover. Probably Night Rain tomorrow, hopefully. I don't know. I want to see if I can get Tumaru done this weekend, though. So hopefully I'll be able to squeeze that in. We'll see how that goes. But anyway, thanks so much, guys, for joining me again. I've been feeling a little sore still lately, so unfortunately, it's been a bit of a lingering problem. But hopefully that'll be, like, done this weekend, and then I'll be back in tip-top shape and stuff like that. It's not affecting my gaming too much, but it is making me a little bit more tired than usual with everything I gotta get done, so. Oh, boy. Anyway,